Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Give to Jenkins. Look out. He's got speed. Jenkins. He's going to go. Tay Jenkins for 6. 63-yard touchdown run, and the Warriors have evened it. Here is Lulla again. Looks downfield. Across, wide open. Makes a man miss. Here is Hill. Amir Hill with the touchdown.
All the young people across the state that grow up, so they dream of, playing here, playing in Memorial Stadium, whether it's in the state championship or eventually here with us. So, I think one of our jobs is to nurture football. Whether it's clinics that we do, youth camps that we do, hosting high school games, hosting all the smaller schools and colleges in the state. They all come to us. They come over to us and visit us, watch practice. We want to be a place that supports football.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's not DB. That's Austin Jacobsen. He's here with me. I'm Ravi Lulla on the Pillar Exterior stage. Austin, how are you this morning?
Tired, but we're getting through because
you had a quick turnaround last night.
Yeah, quick turnaround. Even though the sports world continues to turn, Hurrdat Sports continues to burn. So we work hard, and then we rest on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the Hurrdat Sports team never rests. Occasionally we will play pickup football in our yard outside.
Well, and then everyone will have tremendous injury afterward, too. We'll have some bum ankles. You were sore.
I was fine.
You were sore.
I was all right. I didn't roll an ankle like our guy Andy or anything.
That was tough to hear.
But no, Austin's in here for DB. DB will be down in Lincoln all day calling the Class C 1 and 2 and Class B state championships. So we wish him the best. Real quick before we get to anything else, I did want to give DB a shout out. I don't know if he's listening yet or not, but obviously, our hearts and thoughts and prayers and whatever else you believe in go out to Coach Lamanji as he's dealing with a medical situation that prevented him from coaching in the game last night. But just as a friend, I'm just super proud of DB and the job he did in kind of a short notice and a tough notice, being kind of the acting head coach the acting head coach for Westside last night. Just as a friend and as a guy I respect and admire, super proud of him and his team. I know you were down at the game last night, and like that Millard South team is a wagon.
Yes.
And I do want to say, because some people, we've had almost every coach on. Mm-hmm. Almost every high school coach was in the play. I think literally every coach except Ty Wisdom.
Yes.
And that was not a DB thing. We tried to get Coach Wisdom. He didn't get back to us. We tried to have him on. Congratulations to Millard South. That pains me to say, not because of DB. I'm a Millard North guy.
That's Millard North thing. Yeah,
I come by my hatred for Millard South, honestly, right? That nothing's changed that. That's not a Wisdom thing.
That's actually one of my favorite parts of being at the state title games yesterday is, obviously we've been around for a little bit with Hurrdat, that I think some people still feel like we share favoritism to certain schools.
Oh yeah.
And me being a new part of the team, they were like, well, you guys only root for so-and-so. I was like, hey man, listen, I don't even know where these schools generally are. So maybe for me personally, no, maybe not.
Cause you're from Central Nebraska.
Well, I grew up in the Panhandle. So,
okay. So you're from Western Nebraska.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the C1 game is going to hurt my heart.
But you were working in Central
I was
Nebraska.
working in Kearney. Yeah.
Okay.
So shout out ESPN Tri-Cities. I've now
right.
been on every radio station in Central Nebraska, Robbie. My conquering tour of the state is coming to a head. So eventually I will get there.
So you've got us covered for the western and central parts of the state. I got us covered out here. But no, my biases and favoritism and hatred, I come by that honestly. We don't get a memo when we sign up at Hurrdat.
Right.
They're here's who we like, here's who we don't like.
We should have that on there though, right? Where are your biases?
Yes, that should be
in
part
teams, I should say. We should make sure we can make that clear.
We should have that as part of the application process, honestly. No, it's I root for Westside because of DB and I kind of like the way they go about their business. But
what you had said about DB just being thrown into that situation, they clearly still had a plan in place.
100%.
And that first half went exactly how Westside wanted it to go. 10-6.
Yes.
They were playing Westside football. And, for an active interim coach, whatever the tag you want to put on him, he was put into some pretty precarious positions to make some really tough calls. The 4th and 2, in their own territory on their 25 or 30-yard line.
Yeah,
that flipped the game on its head in a different way, gave momentum back to South, and I mean, it's an unenvious position to be in for sure.
For sure, and it's frankly, it's way better than anybody else has played Millard South all year.
Yes,
not even in the neighborhood, right? But it goes back to a thing that I'm pretty sure DB said this on the air several times over the last week and a half was, and maybe even before that when they were in the semifinal matchups, was if you can do everything right and Millard South is so talented, it might just not matter.
Yep.
And I think that's basically what happened last night. Obviously, Hill for Amir for Millard South went off, had some huge plays, huge gains, 3 touchdowns, I believe.
All in the second half,
Yeah, I mean, they just had the one in the first half, that first early on in the beginning of the second quarter.
Hit the big pass to Marion, and then, got in on the next, sweep route or whatever.
Yep, and then they missed the extra point, so it's 6-0 for a while there. That's the only points they had in the first half, which is unbelievable for an offense of that level of explosiveness. But you could just kind of see exactly what DB was talking about, is you can do all the right things, and at some point they still might just pop off and get you.
Yep.
And that's how I saw that game play out, was just they have so many playmakers on so many levels. And it really seemed like, I know DB was really concerned about Amarion Jackson. Without Isaac Jensen, it helped out a little bit in terms of limiting the offensive weapons, but they still have plenty. But he was really concerned about Amarion Jackson, and he's like, we're going to have to pick a guy that we're just okay if he goes off, right? Because you can't stop everybody. And I don't know if Hill was that guy or not for that they picked. They're like, hey, if we have to give something up, it's him. But regardless of what it was, obviously Millard South proved it's like, we got playmakers everywhere, so we're gonna be okay.
Well, and that same note too. I mean, Marion Jackson went down and didn't come back in for after he left after a kickoff return, and it felt like it was only a matter of time until Westside either continued to just beat up on Millard South. They weren't going to figure it out, or Millard South was going to turn into this creative monster, and that's what they ended up doing. They found the one person that wasn't a part of the defensive coverage scheme. I talked to Jet Tamala after the game, and I asked him what was different about this contest compared to the other games that you've played, because it felt like it was so much easier all season long. He was like, well, we're built for this. We're built to be able to handle any situation.
Yeah.
And truthfully, they are. And they showed it, and honestly, they're going to do it again in a year.
Yeah, I'm really interested, not to fast forward too much, I am really interested next year, because a lot of the guys for Millard South come back. A lot of guys for Westside come back too.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Braylon Warren as a sophomore this year. You've got Tay Jenkins as a sophomore this year. I believe Quentin Warren's a junior this year. You've got a lot of really Purify is a sophomore. Eli Johnson is a junior, I believe. Like, you've got a bunch of guys on both sides. Obviously, Jet Tamala, Amarion Jackson, Isaac Jensen. You've got a bunch of younger guys on the Millard South side as well. So, and that's going. I mean, if you had to bet on it, we're not to the Warhorse segment yet. But if you had to bet on it, which I do not encourage people to do on high school sports, but if you had to bet on it, I would say we're going to be looking at the same spot next year with Millard South and Westside.
It's the general question we ask ourselves, even like in the NFL. It's like, the Chiefs or the field. It's like, are you taking Westside and Millard South or the field to be in Class A? I'm going to take Westside Millard South. Like, that's the only difference, except if power points, fluctuate and they have to play in a semifinal. That's the only difference.
Yeah, that's the only variable. Yeah, is if the power points for some reason screw up a finals matchup. But it kind of reminds me of a few years back where Bellevue West and Miller North in basketball just seemed on collision courses over and over and over.
And you know what? They were great games.
Yeah,
every time.
It was great for high school basketball in the state.
Yep.
Right.
Football at the state level last night was at its highest with the two best teams playing.
100%.
And there's been the whole season long argument about building up these programs and all the different transfer stuff. And I don't want to get into all that because Damon's obviously much more accredited into that than I am.
Sure.
But you can't argue that the two best teams in Class A were playing last night.
100%.
I mean, they were for sure the two best teams.
And it was, this is the only thing I'll say about how these teams have been assembled. And somebody texted me a stat last night that I was blown away by, that I believe 14 of Millard South's 22 starters had transferred in.
Yes.
But here's the thing. They are building their team and their program and their roster according to the rules that are provided to them. Mm-hmm. So what else do you want people to do?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Like, you could sit here and not like it, okay, but all the member schools agree to these rules, right? This isn't the end. Like, the NSA is basically just, hey, these are the rules you want? Okay, we'll put them in place.
Yep.
They don't do a lot of policy making. We talked to Nate Newhouse a month ago about kind of this very thing. They are at the directive of the member schools. This is what the member schools have decided they wanted. Now, they might change their mind at some point.
Yes.
Just like the NCAA member schools change their mind. They're like, yeah, we kind of want to get rid of the transfer rule. And we kind of want to be able to pay these guys. And why don't you just leave us alone on some of these, investigations, whatever. And guess what? Haven't heard a ton about NCAA investigations lately.
Yeah.
As much as we did 10 years ago, right? They're at the directive of these schools, because without these schools, they don't exist. So you can say what you want. I'm going to hate Millard South. I hated Millard South before they transferred everybody in. I didn't like them all the way back to when they were beating Eric Crouch in the mid-90s. I believe they beat him in a semifinal, for a state title in like 95. Like, my dislike comes by, honestly, it has nothing to do with anybody currently on the roster. It's just like, hey, I grew up on 144th and Pacific. You guys are the bad guys down 144th and Q. That's just how it works, right?
Fair enough.
I don't love Millard West either. I'm an equal opportunity other Millard hater as well.
Fair. Well, and don't forget too, you also had 6 or 8 hours of hating 8-man football for yesterday. Are you Ravi Lulla? Very excited that 8-man football is officially over.
No,
for the season.
I love 8-man football. It's just not the same thing.
Oh, but the Stanton game.
Oh, it was incredible.
Was fantastic.
No, I love 8-man football. It's so fun to watch.
The run the ball dads had to have had a heyday with that D1 championship game.
I loved that Stanton game. I loved the but I love arena football too. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's a different game. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a terrific product. It's just different.
You didn't tune into the 6-man games on Friday?
I did not tune into the 6-man games.
Big upset, Stewart. Stewart got SEM.
I have no frame of reference whatsoever for 6-man football. Like, fair, I have no. I mean, Mike is. I want to go see it at some point.
Yeah.
But Mike Sautter has tried to explain it to me a little bit, and the only thing he ever tells me is it's a lot of pitchy woo woo, and I'm like, Mike, what does that mean? And he's like, imagine the Stanford Cal band play. Yeah. That's the entire game. I was like, that sounds incredible.
Yep.
Where is the closest 6-man game I can go see? And he's like, it's 18 hours away. I'm like,
well, that's not necessarily true. You got Parkview Christian in Lincoln. They're
that's right.
A private school that plays 6-man.
I didn't realize they were in 6-man. Now, I think when I was coming up, they were 8-man.
Yeah.
Because we played them when I was at Concordia as a basketball coach, but I believe they were an 8-man football school at the time.
Yeah.
But it's been a great day of yesterday was a great day of high school championships. Today, we've got 3 more. I'm very excited for these as well. We talked to some of those guys yesterday. Central City and Norfolk Catholic is going to be a barn burner. Like, I'm super excited.
Bishop Newman, Norfolk.
Bishop Newman, Norfolk Catholic, and then Central City, Wahoo. Both of those games are going to be incredible. Yeah. Super excited for those. And I mean, Bennington Scott's like a cherry on the top of that Sunday.
I mean, I just made this whole pitch about the two best teams in the state playing each other. I might have to say it again on Wednesday morning or tonight, because it's going to be the same thing, I think, between Bennington and Scott. And then you just love the storylines in all of them, too. For Class C2, Connor Booth, how healthy is he? Is he going to be able to come back in? And then in the C1 game, I would never want a team to get down early because, we're unbiased. But I really hope Central City just air raids it.
Yeah.
I hope Dana Holgerson's the offensive coordinator for a day. That would be fantastic, because just watching them pitch it around the yard is going to be a beautiful
And they've
day.
Got a ton of offensive talent. They're super explosive.
Mm-hmm. They did beat Sydney, though, so I can't root for the Bison.
You can't root.
Apologize. Sorry.
Do we have DB?
We do.
Whoa. We got a special guest, Damon Benning, joining us here. DB, how you doing this morning, bud?
I'm good. Getting ready for these broadcasts, heading down to Lincoln. We didn't get home, and we didn't really leave the school until about 12:40. A couple of the coaches stuck around, and we're hanging in there, man. We emptied the clip last night, and so there's always a couple things you want back, but we played a good football team, and I just congratulations to Millard South. That they got a lot of weapons.
DB, we were talking earlier about kind of how that game went. Is there any better?
Crazy.
Is there any better way that first half could have gone? Like, is that exactly what you wanted?
Yeah, it is. And we got off to such an okay start offensively. It was 10-6 going in at the half. We felt good because I didn't really think they were going to make it. I talk to you all the time, so I knew like they have really, really good athletes. A lot of them out better in space than we did, so we were going to have to be kind of pinpoint with our execution. And we had the ball 10-6. We had it on offense twice with a chance to go up 2 scores. I felt like if we could go up 2 scores, we were gonna really be able to go into the next phase of what we wanted to do defensively, which was to pressure out of kind of our nickel package. But we just couldn't get there. We drove the ball twice. We crossed the 40. We come away with no points. Then they turn around and answer. I mean, it's a tough offense to hold down, right? Mm-hmm. And we let them off the hook. I felt like the game changed, in my opinion, with the face mask when we had a chance to get them off the field. Right, yep. It was 3rd and 17, and things were rolling. We get the face mask. It's unintentional, just trying to make a play on a really good quarterback, and they get the ball at the 50, and Podge, we wanted to check a coverage. We went to what we call ice and miscommunication. You turn a really good player. I mean, how good's Amir Hill?
Yeah.
It's pretty good when whatever option he is the guy that ends up taking over the game, right? Just single-handedly almost.
Yeah.
The incredible ball from Tamala. We had him dead to rights 2, 3, 4 times. He throws the ball. He keeps it in play. Like, I don't think you guys understand how hard some of those throws were that he made off his back foot. And he's not throwing them out of bounds. I mean, those are in bounds where his guys can make a play. And, Hill got us twice. The one over the middle where he broke the 4 or 5 tackles, I'm like, okay, guys, let's rally. They did a really good job defensively. This is kind of the game within the game, right? Early on they brought a ton of pressure. And, I think it hurt them a little bit. But then, Coach Urban, he decided, and rightfully so, that he could win with his front 4. So his front 4 got busy, and they played coverage, and it's tough. I mean, Braylon's 15 years old, and it got hectic in a hurry.
DB, when it came to Tay-Tay's big touchdown run, obviously that was a backbreaker there in that first half, but kind of bottled up afterward. Did you notice anything on the field that Millard South changed just to keep him contained after that?
Well, I mean, I like the well-coached defensively, and they played pullers really well, and we kind of got away from our inside run game where from tackle to tackle. And again, another, he's just a sophomore, and I talked to him at half. I try to leave the offense alone as much as I can, unless, we're talking about going forward or you have 2 downs, so then I'll click over and talk to Coach Sikora and Coach Calbretto and those guys. But, the only thing I said to him at the half is just to relax and kind of slow down. Not every play is going to be a big play. Press the point of attack and just kind of trust it, and as the game wore on, everybody wants to make a play. We we had an opportunity to get our hands on some balls, and you know that we got to help our quarterback. We got to help our quarterback out too. You know, so we left a little out there, but I mean, no shame. It was a heck of a Ravi. I mean, you knew my temperament the whole morning.
Yep.
Right, and so there's just a lot going on, and I just feel bad because we really, really, really wanted to get one for Coach.
Yeah, and you mentioned all the last really week and a half, however long it was between games, and I think that's what we really saw play out was, you guys can do just about everything right, but your margin of error is going to be so thin because of all the playmakers they have at the other side. It seemed like, you seemed like a little Nostradamus over there. It seemed like that's exactly what happened.
It was, and when you want to beat a team like that, you have to catch some breaks, I think, or at least be able to make some. We we had a 3rd and 8, and they throw a speed out, and Lofton makes an unbelievable catch. I mean, that ball is in the air before he's out of his break. It's right in front of me. And I thought we did a good job with him. He's a good player. But I told you we weren't going to double him. I mean, if he was going to go do work, then he was going to go do work. We were going to try to take away a couple of other things, and so they just made plays. I can't tell you how impressed I am with Tamala. And it's not. Listen, I get some of the criticisms, right? I talk to coaches all the time when they come to school, and they talk about arm strength, and I told you this off air too, Ravi. When you watch him, the way that he can make plays, but keep the ball in play, is the second to last. The touchdown they made to make it 20. There's nothing we could do about that. We played that perfectly. We pressured. We got him out of the pocket. He scrambled. He's down in front of their sidelines. He throws the ball straight down the sideline where only his guy can get it, and Hill comes back and makes some diving catch. I mean, if I had a hat on, I'd just tip it, So I thought our guys, we hung in there. Man, we play hard, right? I mean, our guys play really hard, and we just couldn't figure out a way to get enough points. We felt like going in, if we could score 17, we could win, and I believe that. I thought we could do a good job with them slowing down their offense if we didn't let the ground game go on. And they got the one long run late, and the dam had broken. But I felt like we neutralized the run game, and man, but I say it all the time, man. Playmakers make plays, and theirs did.
Well, DB, we appreciate you taking the time to call in here. Obviously, please give Coach Lamanji all our best. And
that's the most important thing, right?
100%.
I called and and I told him I got one text during the game, and it's pressure exclamation point, and then I got an I love you and I'm proud of you, and he means the world to us, and especially to me personally. So just wishing for the best. He's got another procedure today, and I'll go to work in Lincoln and cheer on some more high school kids. I love it.
Well, DB, we love you and we're proud of you as well, and we look forward to being back with you tomorrow.
All right, man. I appreciate you holding it down. You guys have a great rest of the show.
Thanks,
Appreciate
DB.
it. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm here. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage, and reminding you, if you're on the road this morning, make sure your eyes are focused and straight ahead. As the driver, you've got one job. That is to drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Really appreciate DB taking the time to talk to us this morning. If I had to guess, he's definitely under 3 hours of sleep he's operating on. He may not have slept at all, like, if I'm going to be totally honest with you.
Which I think we should be clear. We didn't force him to call in at 7. That he could have called in at any point, but
well, he's got to go work.
That is true.
He's got to go call the games, and they start pretty early today too. And he's a stickler for prep, so he may have been on his way to Lincoln already, and that's why he was available.
He's got to show up Burrs because Burrs was he in a hoodie and a jacket yesterday?
He was rocking the.
I know you feel a particular way about that.
Well, I don't. Andrew Whitworth wears that all the time.
True.
That's all he wears.
So it's a Matt Verse classic now that he's done it once.
Yeah.
He can't do it again.
He can do it again. I see this dude on Thursday Night Football every single week, and he wears the same outfit every single week.
Although he didn't do it for the Snow Bowl, though.
I will say he has his buddy Ryan Fitzpatrick has helped him out just by wearing hideous combinations and distracts me. I care too much about these things, if I'm being honest.
No.
But it is a thing that I noticed. No, I actually like the look in general. I just need him to mix it up a little bit.
That's fair.
You know, I need a little versatility. I get it, you know?
I understand.
No, we really do appreciate DB calling and talking to us. We'll talk to Mike Sautter here in just a few minutes to talk about the Class C and B games as well. Like we said earlier, great slate of games.
Yes,
by the way, what I really liked about yesterday was just the message that the Westside message, love where you're at. That was the message that they were, portraying yesterday, and I thought it really came across. I mean, it was an emotional day last night, emotional night last night on both sides of the football. So.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a thing, that wasn't new last night. That's a thing they say all the time is you love where you're at. And it's just another way of kind of saying, like, be in the moment, be focused on what's in front of you. And that's something we can appreciate. We had a coach last night that I did not appreciate, not in Nebraska.
Oh.
But did you happen to catch any of
can I guess? Can I take a guess?
Go ahead.
Was he in Hawaii?
Yes, he was in Hawaii. He's one of my least favorite guys.
Grumpy guy
to start off with.
Danny.
One of my least favorite people. And you saw yesterday why. And if you didn't hear the whole press conference, I would encourage you to go back and listen because it's actually worse than the soundbite.
It's
so much worse than the soundbite.
I saw the quote card, so I didn't hear what he said.
Yes.
But Hurley's one of the few people that you can read
and hear it in his voice.
It's actually exactly what he said. It's one of the few quotes that it's never out of context.
So the one that got the headline was somebody asked if he thought the technical in overtime cost him the game. And he goes, "No, I thought it was the bleepy calls." And
the stinky calls.
Yeah, sure. That's the TBS version. He did the HBO version. And so first of all,
I thought he was drinking mushroom tea. Shouldn't he be zen now?
No.
He should be very chakras aligned, all good. He has these moments where he just erupts and blows up, and then all of a sudden he turns into ultimate zen. He's like, "Oh, I don't need to get upset anymore. Our team's really good." And then you go to Hawaii and you get the most upset.
Yeah, it's like, bro, you're in Hawaii, chill. But no, so that was the one that got the headlines because it's kind of a catchy, eye-grabbing thing. And, he should definitely get fined aggressively for that. But then he goes on, and this is the part that really kind of irked me the most because I expect Danny Hurley to be a D-bag. That's just sort of the place where I live.
Yeah.
And I'm, by the way, I'm right. This guy sucks. I can't, I know people are like, "Oh, he's a really good basketball coach." That's fine. This guy sucks.
Yeah.
He's not a
better
guy.
basketball coach than human.
Oh, without a doubt. And, to be fair, there's a lot of Bo Pelini in Danny Hurley.
That's a good way. Yeah.
He might, if he never coached basketball again, he might be a fine guy. He might be okay.
Yeah.
There's something about that environment that makes him a full-on psycho. Although I do feel like he'd be one of those sales managers that just screams at you.
Yeah.
I think that's ingrained in who he is.
I could see him being a manager of a car wash and always getting mad at high school kids.
Yeah,
I feel like
100%.
That's right. He's always yelling the towels are never stacked properly. I feel like that's his MO.
I feel like he would manage a Chick-fil-A.
He would be the worst.
No, Chick-fil-A.
There's no way he would pleasure you.
Chick-fil-A.
No way. No way. 0%.
You're right. Chick-fil-A people are too nice. He would manage. Oh man, what's a place that's kind of a dumpster fire?
Well, I don't want to say dumpster fire for obviously benefit financial reasons, but an overnight Wendy's that would be a good one, right?
Yes. If he was a Wendy's, I was thinking Popeyes for some reason.
That's a good one too. That's
anywhere
a good choice.
where you just have high school kids working, and it's obviously a very part-time job for them. And this is his career and takes it way too seriously. Although, take your career seriously, whatever, guys. But he would be screaming at movie theater. He's the manager at a movie theater.
I was thinking small, not chain grocery store too.
Yes.
Would also be a good one.
He's the manager at a movie theater or a grocery store where you have a 17-year-old stock boy. And he's like,
"Are you committed to this? Do you want to be here?
Do you not care that the pepper flakes go on the top shelf in the middle?" And then he's like, "No, you know why our sales are down? Because our bleepy stock boys. That's why." Not because everybody orders everything off Amazon anymore.
You do have to wonder in this environment, and they're in Hawaii. Like, they clearly have other things that they're going to do outside of basketball, right? Like, they're not just going to go to Hawaii and just practice and play games. Like, they probably the university.
We saw Creighton there last year. They go on trips and like they do stuff.
But does Hurley just cancel all those? And he's like, "You're in your hotel room from 8 until 5. We're going to practice from 6 until 8, and then 5 until 8."
No,
that's what we're doing
he
today.
He probably goes and is just as insufferable on the boat as he is on the court. Like, here's the thing that I really didn't like, though, because, okay, he's like, the bleepy calls. There's the reason we lost the game. It's like, no, you gave up 99 points.
Yeah, shouldn't have been down 10 with, like, under 2 minutes to go in regulation. But sure, be mad at
blame
the
it
tech.
on the refs.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it's like, okay, you gave up 99 points in a basketball game. I get some of those were in overtime. Mm-hmm. You gave up too many points. If you score 97 points in a basketball game, you should win.
And when you're the number 2 team in the country,
you should definitely win. Especially when you kind of hang your hat on your defense. Like, that's his calling card is defense. Here's what I really don't like, though. There's 2 things. And I could go on forever about this because, as mentioned, I hate Danny Hurley. This dude.
In case it wasn't clear.
Yeah, this dude sucks out loud. Like, he's the worst. Okay? Like, if I had to save Danny Hurley or Deion Sanders from a burning building, I'm saving Deion Sanders.
No, it's fair.
You be you.
Exactly, Deion. But like, that's how much I dislike Danny Hurley. Okay. But here's the thing. Here's what I really didn't like. It's not the bleepy calls, because whatever, you want to yell at adults and being refs bad at their jobs, whatever. You're going to get fined. But, I don't love the shirking responsibility of giving up 99 points, but whatever. What I didn't like is then he calls out the Memphis guy. He says, how can you call an over the back in that situation with his half-ass box out?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're going to question the effort of a player that's not even on your team? And you know why it didn't look like he was boxing out? Because until your guy came flying into his back, he was nowhere to be found.
Yes.
That's why he didn't box him out. Okay? So that's still a foul, bud, because he goes jumping into your guy's back and throws him out of bounds with his body.
I mean, he just went like Nebraska State basketball dad in that moment.
That's a foul, bud. I don't know what to tell you. That's a foul every day of the week. He's like, he wasn't even arguing that it wasn't really a foul, although he still threw the Memphis guy under the bus.
Right.
He just goes, how do you call that in that situation? It's like, I don't know, because it's a foul, Dan.
Yeah.
Like, here's the other thing that I really hate about Danny Hurley, and there's a lot of coaches like him, but he's the most annoying about it, is the reason he's mad is because he literally teaches his defense to foul all the time, and that they won't call all of it.
That's quite the opposite of another Big East team that's kind of local to the area.
Yes, it was just as like, we're never going to foul, right? But Danny Hurley, his entire philosophy, it's like the Seahawks in the Legion of Boom. They're like, we're going to mug you on every pass, and they're not going to call pass interference every time.
Yep. But when they do, it's what do you mean?
How do you call it there?
How could you possibly?
We've been assaulting people all game. Now you're mad? Like, that's what Danny Hurley's. He's like, we've been assaulting people for the last decade I've been here, however long he's been there.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, now you're going to call? It's like, oh, yes, they're going to call the game by the rules. I'm sorry that you didn't recognize some of the Hawaii officials, and now you're mad about it. Mm-hmm. But, yes, those are fouls. They've always been fouls. I'm so sorry somebody actually called a basketball game accurately against you because they weren't afraid of you being a psycho.
Yeah.
Like, that's what makes me mad, is he counts his entire defense on, hey, we're just going to foul you the entire time. No way they're going to call them all. And they're like, we're calling your BS. We're going to call them. Those are fouls.
My mom is a psychologist, and I'm really glad you got that off of your chest. I felt like you had that burden in you, and I'm glad we can move on, and we'll get Mike Sautter in here in minutes. That way it's all clear and free.
I'm just going to say one more time, Danny Hurley sucks, and I hate him. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
The lessons of the game are the lessons of the season, right? Like, we fumbled the ball on the 20-yard line. And if we do that against Iowa, who's plus 11, we're not going to win. So while people, I think Dana's done an amazing job. Let me start there. But I think if you say it's a play call, you hear Dana on the headset the whole time. He's just talking about execution. Like the guys who practiced the best on Thursday last week played. Some guys had some false starts and some mistakes on Thursday. He's like, he's out. 13, you're in. Let's go. So IGC got a chance to play, and he made a play in the game. So there's a real focus on execution. And when the guys execute the play calls, and so I think that was the message to the guys, like, hey, if you execute and practice at a high level, you're going to have an opportunity to play in the game. And then when you get in the game, make the most of it. And so when we had penalties, we didn't score on those drives. When we snap the ball on third down, we're going on 2 and we snap it on 1, and all of a sudden the ball's in the quarterback's hands. There's nothing he can do. But when we just settled down and just played, then guys made the plays necessary to make. So it's kind of a blend of everything we've been trying to say to them all year coming to life. Like, hey, just go execute. I think the thing Dana's done a great job of is, like I said, he's cut things down to a degree, but also he's demanding that they execute if they want to get on the field. And that's kind of how we handle things on defense. And, I think it's kind of now played over to offense as well.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We'll be joined shortly by Mike Sautter from NEB Preps and Hurrdat Sports, of course. Did want to give you a quick rundown of who else is coming up on the show. At 8 o'clock, we're going to talk to Scott Dochterman, who is a national college football writer for The Athletic. He's also assigned to Iowa, Nebraska this week. So we'll get a nice national perspective, and then we'll zero in on Friday a little bit with him as well. 8:30, we've got Anthony Broome, who covers Michigan for On 3. At 9, we've got our regular Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. And then at 9:45, we'll have Stephen Means, who covers Ohio State for Cleveland.com. Obviously got that big Ohio State-Michigan game coming up this week, which I'm going to be honest, just for...
Is it still big?
Just for pure comedy purposes, I kind of want Michigan to pull it out again.
That would be fun, right? It would be fun.
Objectively hilarious.
And to do it the Michigan way this year, where they throw 2 passes,
Yes.
would be objectively hilarious.
Yeah, it'd be super funny. And so
What's the spread in that?
Also, there's a part of me, I don't generally root for people to lose their jobs. And I'm not rooting for that for Ryan Day. I am curious how nuts the Ohio State fan base is.
They are Buckeyes.
Right. It's a good point there. But, like, I genuinely think his job's in danger if he loses to Michigan, regardless of making the playoff, anything else. And so that's going to be super interesting to see. And honestly, I'm just rooting for the chaos more than anything.
Do you know what that line is? Have you looked at it?
I haven't.
Take a guess.
I'm going to guess 17.5.
21.
Ooh.
That is a lot of points.
That's a big number for a rivalry game. Where is it?
It's in the shoe.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that probably makes sense.
I don't know. And the over-under at 43, I mean, you're basically asking Ohio State to score all the points there.
Yeah, I mean,
that's crazy. Which is how the game is likely going to go.
Yeah, Michigan can't really score. Like, they have a hard time, but that's going to be super interesting. I am rooting for the chaos factor in that one.
With you.
But we'll talk to Anthony Broome from Michigan on 3. We'll talk to Stephen Means from Cleveland.com to get a preview of that one as well. To get a preview and a recap of the high school state championships, we got our guy Mike Sautter joining us now. What's going on, man?
Trying to log in here to the stream for streamers. Shane sent it to me.
How was the night last night, or the whole day, I guess?
It was good. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 1.5 competitive games.
Yeah, that was it was an interesting first game to kind of get things going and rolling at 10-15, and then the first contest gets just out of hand that quickly.
What was it, 46-0 at halftime?
Yeah,
46-6. 46-6 at halftime.
Central Valley was pretty good.
Yes.
When Central Valley went, or Stanton went to Central Valley, maybe one of those two, when they played each other in like week 2, it was really close, and people were like, "Whoa, okay, this team's probably pretty good." So since then, they've been pretty good. They've
been rolling, and then I would say we had like 1 3/4 game. There was 13-10 going in the 4th, right, in the Class A game?
Yeah.
So that's it.
Banged it. That's the quick hitter, the quick snowball that Millard South can do to you, and that's what happened. And that's the one thing that playing them this year we said about Millard South was you gotta be able to stay in the fight, and get to deep water, and
it may not matter.
Yeah, and Westside did, and just it was bang bang. 3 plays. One, Christian Jones actually intercepting the ball on 4th and 5 or 8 or whatever.
Yeah,
and he intercepted it at the 2.
Yeah.
If he would have not intercepted that, which
he made a great play on the ball.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
It was a great catch, but just if you don't, then you have the ball on like the 20 something.
Yeah,
it changes momentum.
100%.
It was quite funny to watch the entire Westside defense doing the ball hit the ground.
No, it hit the ground.
And it's probably the one time that ref has been like, nope, it's for sure.
I swear we didn't intercept it.
Yeah.
No, that's tough for sure, because you can't ask a guy to not make the play, right?
But it's just natural instinct, right?
100%.
But at the same time, you have to know time score situation,
right?
Yes.
It's a tough ask,
for sure. It's hard for a high school kid, but it's okay. Millard South deserves, all the flowers and credit.
100%
stuff.
Yeah.
They were the best team. I said in June they were the best team.
Yeah.
I said it all year, and even though people like to delete tweets after I correct them. Last night about 12:45, there was a Millard South parent that said something, and I corrected him. And then I wake up this morning and it's deleted. So thank you.
There you go.
Because homie don't play that. Is that how that works? So,
Mike,
I do believe that is the phrase.
Yeah.
What's the standout individual performance from yesterday out of the 3 games? Do you have one that sticks out the most to you?
Shaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really good. And Amir Hill.
I'll say Amir Hill jumps out.
Well, I mean, if you're going to say Shaw, you could say Wilkie too.
Yeah,
because, I mean, they both. I mean, that game goes on a coin flip.
Yeah, both of them were good. But Amir stepping up when Amarian went down in the second quarter. Amir stepped up. Amir was gonna be a part of the game plan. Anyway, I mean, he's had a good year and been great for them. But
he's not the top of the scouting report for them by any means. You know.
And I will say, to Westside's credit, they single covered
Lofton,
Chase Lofton
the whole game,
and it worked.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, he didn't. He had 1-2 catches.
So. Well, he had the one where he nearly got it. It was out of bounds.
Yeah,
and then he had the other
catch,
that Jones went through the hands on the corner shot. But
Right. So I mean,
and I think he had a little swing pass in the third
he had something. He had the one where he dove forward.
But they did a good job.
Yeah, he had like 2 receptions the whole game, which was incredible for a guy of that talent level.
Yeah, they did a good job. And I mean, for everything that Amir Hill, talking about him, Jet Tamala was pretty dang good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is Jet Tamala gonna get some offers?
At what point are we gonna stop knocking Jet Tamala and talk about how good he is instead of what he can't do? Let's talk about the throw in the third quarter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To Amir Hill in the corner. And then he was rolling out and literally falling down, tackled, and he
I think that's the one DB was talking about.
Yep. He slings one. Like that throw
unbelievable.
Was amazing.
Unbelievable.
Like that kid's really good.
Yeah.
Said it for a long time too.
And he's gotten a ton of reps in a passing concept. Like
his ability to be patient yesterday was very impressive.
He doesn't
comparative
just
to
pull it down and take off
because
the play's not open. No, he just kind of hangs in there and hangs in
and
the
he doesn't
pocket
really
and stuff.
force stuff. Would be really easy for that level of playmakers that you have to get kind of lazy and just play, hey, like Chase Lofton, go get it. Whatever.
Yeah. He's super mature.
Yeah.
Like he's been coached hard. I mean, I don't know what there isn't to like about him.
Well, and how many times
his frame is good?
He's big. He's 6'4". He's got a decent frame.
Yeah. How many times did he roll around and not up or out? I mean, he was constantly looking to make a play downfield.
Yeah, he's always. That's just who he is. Every game I've seen him play this year, even if it was for a half or whatever, it's just always just kind of keeping his feet, like keeping his feet moving a little bit and keeping in rhythm. And it's pretty good. Like he's really good. And that Millard South defense, while we're talking about it.
Yeah. Yes. Their front four was really good.
Knew that they were been. Everyone talks about the Millard South offense.
The defense.
The defense has been pretty damn good. Yeah. Like the whole year.
Honestly,
been really good.
I thought the defensive line made the difference in the game for Millard South.
They did.
Because Westside actually did a really good job of keeping the offense in check for most of that game, kind of until the dam broke late. But if that defensive line isn't doing what they're doing against Tate Jenkins for most of the game, against Braylon Warren and not giving him any time, like Westside's got a real chance.
Braylon had to really pull it down and run. There was a lot of design run in there.
Yeah.
But which is a little different.
It's a little outside their norm.
Normally do.
With him this year at least.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They did a lot with Rezak last year. But different skill set,
In that same sense, I mean, one of the most critical parts of that game, that fourth down, they tried quarterback power one side, and it was blown up from the start. It had no chance.
Millard South didn't have one of their best defensive, if not the best defensive player on their team for 6 weeks. Like, I mean, the defense was
really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
And Tegan Urbon was really good last night. Came back after a compound fracture in his arm 4 weeks ago or whatever.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty good.
Just a little bit of time left here, Mike. What do we got on tap today? We got Class C1, Class C2, and B.
C2, C1, B. So C2, Norfolk Catholic, Wahoo Newman, or Bishop Newman. And then C1, Central City, Wahoo, and then B, Scott Bennington, Part 2. I'm excited. I think that one's going to be pretty good.
It's a really good slate of games in general.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. And, if you look at the first one, and C2 game rematch, but it's kind of one of those. Is Connor Booth healthy enough to give you all he's got, or just a little bit?
Yeah,
that's a big thing. C1 game is kind of the immovable force versus the shiny object of Central City's offense and Wahoo's defense. And then the B game should just be amazing. Like it should be awesome.
All time.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Mike, we appreciate it. Enjoy your time in Lincoln today and hope you get some sleep this weekend.
I'm going right now. Happy birthday to me.
Is it your birthday?
Yes.
Happy birthday, Mike
Yeah,
Sautter.
Mike Sautter.
Yeah.
He's 27 years old, ladies
Yeah,
and gentlemen.
Whoa.
Scott Dochterman coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
26-yard line with 1:08 to play first half. Petrus is going to throw it. Lobs it to the end zone. It is caught. Is it caught? Touchdown! Touchdown, Iowa by Charlie Jones.
What a throw. What a throw.
And what a catch.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, where we are joined on the phone by Scott Dochterman. He's the national college football reporter for The Athletic. Scott, how are you this morning?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
Oh, we're doing well. We appreciate you joining us with quite a slate of college football games coming up as the regular season wraps up. But I want to rewind first before we move on to this week's games and look at some of the results that were a little chaotic, if I may say so myself, from the last week. Out of, I don't know, just you can pick your you can pick your strange result from the weekend, whether it was Oklahoma over Alabama, Florida over Ole Miss. What surprised you the most over the weekend from the results?
Yeah, I think it had to have been Oklahoma over Alabama. That was really a surprise. Oklahoma hadn't played that well all year long. Alabama seemed to be surging again after a couple of hiccups earlier in the season, and Vanderbilt wasn't that bad of a team. So I think when they lost 24-3 and played the way they did, and to me, I think that was the biggest one. I wasn't all that surprised with Ole Miss losing at Florida. Florida has been much improved since the beginning of the season, and that was and they've been, they put themselves in bowl position anyway. So I was less surprised with that one. And then, in the Big Ten, I wasn't, I think the way that Indiana lost was a little bit surprising to me, kind of at the end of that first half, beginning of the second half, two special teams errors. Because I saw Indiana. I was there when they played Nebraska, and I thought they were operating at a very high level and had throughout much of the season, and to see that was a little bit of a surprise to me.
So, Scott, I also wanted to toss in there one of the ones that I don't know if shocked me the most because the line was super goofy on it, so I thought there might be something smelly there. That Auburn-Texas A&M game as well was super goofy, especially the way it started with Auburn jumping out so early on them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what you get sometimes in the SEC, and in particular a team like Auburn that has a lot of talent, has lost some close games, has played there to the end, and really is one of those borderline bowl teams most years. And they lost a game early. I think it was to Cal that really kind of set them back. But for A&M is kind of thrived on their schedule. They haven't had to play many of the really elite teams in the SEC. When they played early on and they got beat by Notre Dame, that really kind of showed me where A&M is. And Auburn, playing at home, that's not an easy place for anybody to go to, especially a motivated team like that at night. And so I guess, I think if A&M had the schedule, say Georgia had, I think we'd be talking about A&M for sure being in the, some other bowl like the Texas Bowl, as opposed to potentially going to the SEC championship.
Scott, talking more about the playoff possibilities and jumping from conferences. I think I saw this stat right. 9 teams are eligible in the Big 12 to win this weekend or to get into the Big 12 championship game. Is there a team that the conference, like the conference officials and the commissioner, are rooting for more than others to get in?
I mean, I don't want to speak for them because that would probably be kind of tough.
Scott, if you were a conference official, who would you be rooting for?
If I was sitting in the back room going, okay, I want these teams to go, I would start with Colorado. I mean, you really would. I mean, to have, that Dion's automatic ratings, you've got Shedeur Sanders, who's going to be a, top, 10 pick, top 5 pick. And then of course, Travis Hunter, who's probably going to win the Heisman. I think when you've got that team, you want that team in there because that just generates, interest and ratings. Number 2, I would probably, that's a good question. Maybe provincially living in the Midwest, I think the good story is, even though Arizona State has really risen with Kenny Dillingham and the way they've played, but Iowa State can win 10 games for the first time in school history this week.
Wow.
And that's a really, that's a good story too. And in some ways you want your legacy programs in the Big 12 to have success. And I don't think Colorado counts because they left. So I think that would be that would be me. But I think if they had Colorado versus either Arizona State or Iowa State, I think they would be Brett Yormark might be doing backflips.
I'm really glad you brought up Arizona State because I feel like I've jumped on their bandwagon probably because they've been such a fun ride these past few weeks. Do you think that Coach Dillingham has worked his way into a bigger role with how Arizona State was projected to be to where they are now, and how if they get to a Big 12 title, do you think that there's a bigger school that could come calling?
Sure. I think, and this is kind of the point where we're at anyway. It really kind of depends on which schools are open. But, I think the bigger question, once we get out of this season, and Kenny Dillingham fits into it, I think Matt Campbell fits into it, is when you look at where you are, what is a better place for you to be right now? Is it better to be in the Big 12 where you have a path to the playoff every year if you have a good program that you can get there every year? Or is it better to be at an Iowa or Nebraska where that path is going to be a meat grinder to get there every year? Now you're in a better league, no question. You're making more money. It's higher profile, but to win a championship is going to be just unbelievably difficult for a team in the Big Ten versus at the Big 12. If you've got a team of equal or value, you've got a chance to run the table. And so that's going to be an interesting question. I think if a place like, say, Auburn opened up or Florida or someplace like that, which I think, certainly Florida is probably not going to open up now, that's something that maybe those types of coaches might consider. But, just to go to another school and then when one of those leagues, like, say, Purdue opens up, I think Arizona State's a sleeping giant. It's got everything you want. You want to really maximize it while you can.
That's the old Lincoln Riley question, right?
I was just going to say, it feels like we're talking a lot about Lincoln Riley without talking about Lincoln Riley here.
Yeah, there's some points there, too. I mean, to go, and in his case, you straddle the line among three leagues. You could, if they were still in the Big 12, they're the big fish, smallish pond. And then you if you go to the SEC, I mean, their offense was dreadful this year. I mean, that's what was probably surprising beating Alabama. But then decide, all right, I'm going to go to USC where the grass is greener. Well, you come to the Big Ten, and I think teams that have come to the Big Ten in recent memory, maybe don't respect it enough until you get into it and you see the physicality along the line of scrimmage, game in and game out. And I think that's kind of where they are. Now, they've played pretty well at home. They played not so well on the road. And I think they've got the facilities, the resources, and the tradition to maximize and go forward. But I think it's going to be a really tough grind. And then playing on the West Coast, I mean, you just really have to admire what Oregon's been able to do because, traveling the country that way and putting yourself in that position is really surprising.
Scott, I want to switch over to the SEC here because I think most people are expecting, obviously, multiple big bids out of the Big Ten, multiple bids out of the SEC as well. But as I'm looking at the SEC and their standings and where everybody's at, there's 3 teams that have 2 losses or fewer. If the SEC is going to get 4 bids the way we think the Big Ten is, you're going to have at least a 3-loss team in the playoff. Do you think there are 4 worthy teams in the SEC to go to the college football playoff?
What a great question, because we've really juggled what our definition is of a playoff team.
Sure.
I mean, in years past, we wouldn't be anywhere near this, but now that we're going 12 deep, you're kind of looking at what's your best resume versus what's the best eye test.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where we're at. I mean, when you look at, right now it looks like the ACC has got a chance to get 2 in, Miami, SMU, maybe even Clemson, out of that group. And, but then you look at the SEC and whether it's, Ole Miss or Alabama or even South Carolina, which has played really well lately, they're all got 3 losses, and that would have normally just punted you, into the stratosphere and into Citrus Bowl territory. And, and now I think, but, when you see Alabama play outside of, especially last week, you think, that's a pretty good team. Same thing with Ole Miss, that they can probably beat anybody on their best day. But, the results matter and the resumes matter, but But then you start to look and you go, man, the SEC, as much as sometimes in the Midwest we want to kind of poo-poo it a little bit, it is a meat grinder. I mean, there are some really good teams, and it's kind of like the NFL where game in and game out, anything can happen for 2/3 to 3/4 of the league, and so you kind of got to give them a little bit of credit, or at least a mulligan when they get in the conversation. But you also can't just like outright refuse that. Hey, SMU loses by a field goal to Miami, therefore they're out of the tournament altogether. Versus a team that got beat by 21 points at Oklahoma, or a team like Ole Miss that lost to a 4-7 Kentucky. I mean, those things matter too. So it's going to be a great debate, and I think going forward, whenever there's the decision to expand, which I think it will. Whether the Big Ten and SEC get 3 or 4 automatics, I think that's going to be a really strong thing moving forward.
Scott, I'm going to ask you a very direct question, kind of comparing and contrasting the SEC and the Big Ten, and I think there's 2 teams that sort of sum up the differences here. Who's better in your eyes, and who's more deserving of a playoff spot, Tennessee or Indiana?
Ooh. Indiana.
Okay.
I think Indiana's fantastic. The other day things snowballed on them, and I've been to the Death Stars for so many decades now, and I've seen good teams wilt there. In fact, I think Nebraska played about as well as anybody has, years, other than Michigan. That's a tough place to go, and they're a really good team at Ohio State. I mean, they're still to me the best team in the country. And so when you look at Indiana, yes, they have played a subpar record based on the results, but I'm not going to fault them for playing Michigan and Washington, the 2 college football playoff finalists last year. They're having a down year. I mean, they're bowl teams. Nebraska's a bowl team. I think there's they've done a nice job, but I think the way that they play is so much more consistent than what we've seen out of Tennessee. Now, I'll say this: I think Tennessee's also a playoff team, and I'd like to see them play an 8-9 or 7-10 game. I think that'd be great, especially because their proximity is not that. I guess it is a little far, but it's not that far. Really. But I think the funny part is, to me, is I'm sure a lot of fans of whether it's the SEC or of some of those specific programs are probably laughing after Caleb Downs' punt return for a touchdown, and it's like, haha, we've told you they're not worthy, and then all of a sudden there came the tidal wave against the SEC with Ole Miss losing and Alabama losing, and kind of put them on their heels a little bit.
Scott, looking at the Big Ten, if everything goes as it's supposed to, it should be an Ohio State-Oregon rematch for the Big Ten championship game. But the projections, as it's been the past few weeks, have Ohio State in that 5th spot. And I won't lie, as someone who's not going to play 2 football games, and you would have to have that bye for Oregon, Ohio State may have a pretty good argument to say, well, maybe our better route is to be that 5 seed and have an easier path forward from that spot. Is that something realistic that teams might be considering if they can get to that 5 and have to play the group of 5 champ, or try to find the right matchups moving forward? Maybe not just in the Big Ten sense, but just across that playoff landscape?
No question. I think this is something that is the unintended consequences of the playoff, that the number 5 spot may be as advantageous as any spot on the board, because yes, you've got that extra game, and that you can't dismiss the toll that takes, but you're at home and you're against the weakest team in the tournament. And that could be, let's say Boise State has to go to Ohio State, or maybe it's even the Big 12 champ if Boise State stays ahead of it. And whether it's the Cyclones or Boise State going to Ohio State, that's kind of an advantageous game, I think, for the Buckeyes. Then you play number 4, which would be either the Big 12 champ or the Boise State. So you've got, if you're playing Iowa State and then Boise State, or in whatever order, or Arizona State or whatever, you've got to feel pretty good about that if you're Ohio State, just getting to the semifinals. Versus even if you're number 1, if you're Oregon or Ohio State, and you're playing the 8-9 matchup like we just discussed. What if it's Tennessee and Indiana, and you're playing Tennessee, and they've got Dylan Sampson, one of the best running backs in the country, Nico Iamaleava, quarterback, or you're playing Curtis Rourke, If you're Oregon playing Indiana, you're probably going, oh, that's not really the matchup we'd want. We'd rather have Boise State, or we'd rather have Iowa State, or Arizona State, or whatever. So that is a sneaky advantageous spot. The only question is, to me, is what kind of what's the toll, the cumulative toll on the bodies, by playing one extra game.
And with the loss to Indiana, like you mentioned, against Ohio State, only Oregon's left with, that 0 mark in the loss column across college football. With the playoff going to 12 teams, and obviously more teams can get in, we're talking even 3-loss teams from multiple conferences could enter in for a chance to win a national championship. It feels so different than a decade ago when the first playoff was announced, and of course through the BCS. Do you feel just like generally that college football teams are just playing with less stress to be perfect, to find that unbeaten record, to only finish with 1 loss? It just feels like there's more give and take, and this season has been so chaotic because of it.
I think it's alleviated the stress for everybody, and that and a lot of times that comes from the fans and media, because the stress is applied through fans and media a lot of times and projected upon the players and the teams. So I think that in some ways that you're right that whether it's Alabama losing to Vanderbilt in the past, that would have been it. That would have been the depth shot. And now it's not. So, but this one, the third one, probably is, or it's close to it. So I think there is a little bit of a difference there that in years past. But, each year is really cyclical. I mean, you look at last year, for instance, Florida State was undefeated and left out completely. They were number 5, and it was because Jordan Travis got hurt, and they just didn't look the part. And you look at other years where, this is a true chaos year. If we were just going with a 4-team playoff, it would be pretty wild right now, and there'd be probably a lot more intrigue even to the top 4. So, stress. Yeah, I think I could see that a little bit. But we've also seen different flashpoints where even teams that are on their first or second loss, where that's really been applied. I would say that with Ohio State after losing to Oregon and then playing Nebraska, that last quarter there, you could tell the stress was there for Ohio State, that this was like, hey, this season's kind of teetering for us. And maybe in the Penn State, Ohio State, it was less so game, that game, but I think across the board, it's just a different level, and I think it's much more exciting. I think there are more teams that are available to play in the upper level. Being a Big Ten West junkie all these years, it's a little unfortunate that a team doesn't have a chance to really play for a championship or a division title like this weekend or whatever. But then again, especially the last couple of years, the third and fourth best teams, especially second and third best teams, came out of the East Division anyway. So you're getting a little bit higher product that are competing for the upper levels than maybe you did in the past.
Scott, okay, so I'm glad you were talking about Ohio State there for a second, and I'm curious what you think, because I brought this up earlier. Obviously, this is not a great Michigan team, but it is a rivalry game. You never know how that thing's going to go. If somehow Michigan beat Ohio State, how warm is the seat of Ryan Day? Because they all, in all likelihood, would still make the playoff as a 2-loss team. How weird do things get in Columbus if Michigan pulls this off?
It's really interesting because they could go on and win the national title, and it's got like almost an asterisk to it.
They'd almost have to win the national title though at that point, right? Yes. Like for Day.
Yeah, because the temperature would be like, it's going to be like the birds in the oven in 2 days. I mean, it's going to be your turkey fryers going off. I mean, that series is different, and we've seen some great rivalries. I know in Nebraska, with Oklahoma, Colorado is really a snarky rivalry. I think Iowa is turning into a really great rivalry, but but Ohio State, Michigan is different. That's I don't want to compare it to get too hyperbolic, but sometimes it's not even healthy. And I think to lose the last 3 years and see Michigan win the Big Ten championship the last 3 years and the national title, and if you were to, this is their bad year. I mean, they're 6-5. They're not a good team. They're just a team this year, and you've got all these advantages, and you bought all these players to come there and beat them, and they still beat you at home. I don't think that'd be a very good situation. They would have to win the national title, and they'd have a parade, and there'd probably be a third of the people wouldn't even show up because you lost to Michigan. It's pretty intense.
Scott, I know you're going to be at Nebraska, Iowa this weekend. What are your thoughts on how Nebraska has all of a sudden transformed with Dana Holgorsen as the OC, and what Iowa has looked like with just a litany of quarterback issues, but they still have that guy in the backfield, Caleb Johnson, toting the rock?
What a juxtaposition. I mean, you think about it. On the Nebraska side, you've got a 5-star quarterback that everybody in the country wanted, and then on Iowa's side, you got a 5-star versus a 5th string and a walk-on. That's going to be really an interesting way to look at this when the game goes on to see how much of a role that plays. But I think Nebraska finally got over the hump, which is a good thing. It needed to. I think the Big Ten needed them too, because despite the issues all these years, that it's still a named program. It still gets good ratings. It still generates some interest. So I think it's healthy that the Nebraska got over that 6-win mark. It looked really good the other day against Wisconsin, but I've seen Wisconsin in person, and that's not the Wisconsin I recognized for all these years. And I like the way Dana Holgorsen's calling the offense. You can see he's a pro. You can see that he understands the game and operates and calls it at a high level. When you look at Iowa, this is the best the offensive line has functioned as a group at minimum since 2020, and probably better than that. And this is as good of a running back that Iowa's had since Sean Green won the Doak Walker in 2008. And he's a genuine top 50 guy in the draft. I mean, running backs kind of don't get a lot of love in the NFL, but he's one that will. So this is an intriguing matchup because a lot of the figures are kind of similar here between them. I think they're both really good at stopping the run. They're both, got some, challenges on offense. Iowa's obviously in the pass game. And Nebraska's not been awesome there necessarily either. But, and then you look at Iowa, that they've doubled their point total from a year ago. I mean, they're averaging 29.4 points per game. Last year was 15.4. So they're more formidable than they've been, and a lot of that's because of the running game. But Tim Lester has done a really good job, as an OC in scheming things that maybe his predecessor, did not necessarily. But their defense isn't nearly as good either. So I think this is an even matchup. I think this could go either way, and which kind of speaks to where this series is. I mean, 6 straight games have been decided by 1 score in this series, and I expect it to be all the way down to the end, and the winner to really have a chance to go to the ReliaQuest Bowl.
That is our friend Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Scott, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks so much.
That's Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. We'll be back with Anthony Broome to talk a little Michigan here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Hand off to Mullins, running up the middle. He's got a hole, 45, 40. Oh, Mullins in the clear. Whoa, look at this. Outside the numbers to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Wolverines. Coel Mullins takes it to the house, and Michigan leads 6-0. 53-yard lightning bolt from Coel Mullins.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That is Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now by Anthony Broome. He covers Michigan for On3. Anthony, how are you this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. Obviously, it's a big week in your neck of the woods.
Week.
It is, yeah, it may be the only week that really matters for Michigan and Ohio State coming up this week. But it's a much different game than we've experienced the last few years and, frankly, throughout most of this storied rivalry. How are fans and people around sort of processing the different expectations? Is it just, hey, let's ruin Ohio State's season? Or how's that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, a couple of weeks ago, it kind of felt like a death march. You're sitting at 5-5 on the season, and, you follow the Vegas odds, and throughout the year, it's been steadily increasing in favor of Ohio State. But last week, again, no one's going to do cartwheels over beating Northwestern, but Now, this is a Michigan team that had scored 63 points total since their first bye week. And then they come out of nowhere from the clouds and drop a 50-burger on the Wildcats. It's, they played their cleanest game. They played, was dominant on both sides of the ball, which is something that we haven't seen this year. So, there's a lot of optimism that if you can find a way to get Ohio State into a 4-quarter game, you might be able to make them feel the pressure a little bit. I don't think most people are predicting a win, but, when you come off of a week, especially when you've had a season where you were 5-5 heading into last week's game, it hasn't looked very good on the field, especially offensively. You're one of the worst offensive teams in the country. But when lightning kind of strikes your program, when you find a way to flip the Bryce Underwood last week and a lot of positive things happening with NIL, and then you go out and you have a win like that, it finally feels like they have some momentum and something to kind of hang their hats on. And, if nothing else, this group has played incredibly hard and has not quit on Sherrod Moore this year. So that's a lot of rah-rah stuff. I don't know that I can come up with a lot of football reasons why Michigan, has a chance to hang in this game. But, again, I just feel like momentum and success kind of breeds more of it. And there's no pressure on them at all, which is the biggest difference from the last 2 years. I mean, all of the pressure is on Ohio State, and that's a program that hasn't handled pressure very well. So the opportunity to kind of be the team that, they could lose to Michigan. They'll still make the college football playoff with the chaos that we're seeing right now. But to be the team that kind of throws them into chaos as a program again, it wouldn't be the most satisfying outcome for Michigan, but it would probably be the funniest one.
Anthony, for a reigning national champion, I feel like Michigan has gotten off of the national naysayer train. It feels like everyone's kind of giving the Wolverines a pass because of obviously a huge draft class leaves. You lose your coaching staff. You have Sherrod Moore in. You played well at a couple of key big primetime spots, but does the fan base itself just feel like this season we got our bowl game, we might be able to do something against Ohio State, this season's a wash, let's move forward to next year? Or is there some lingering concerns that grew out of what this season became after winning the title last year?
There are some concerns. I think that, the positives that I said earlier about Sherrod Moore kind of being able to keep the team together, and they've fought and they've played to the end of these games. Like, the reason that fighting, throughout a game, or fight, the physicality you play with throughout a game is kind of been complimented is because they've dug themselves some super big holes early on, and they've had to kind of rally back and keep themselves afloat. They don't, obviously they're not as well coached as they were last year. I think Sherrod Moore has a handle on a lot of things in terms of how to run a program, in terms of just kind of operationally, like the front office type of stuff that he set up, but a lot of questions on the field. And I think, it's kind of turned to, listen, we know what they lost. Not only do you lose the amount of talent that you have, but then you lose, maybe one of the 2 or 3 best coaches at any level of the sport right now. He takes a lot of the key assistants with him, takes the strength guy with him, who a lot of people don't realize, like, players spend most of their time with the strength and conditioning coach. Those guys shape the mentality of a lot of these football teams. So, you really did lose like the heart and soul of your program. And there were guys that stuck around, but it's not a free pass. And it's not quite a year zero, because, they're going to lose 4 or 5 first-round picks off of this team. And you're going to kind of kick yourself for losing games at Washington, at Illinois, at Indiana. They should be better than they are, so there is some frustration with that. But like I said, in the last couple of weeks, specifically the last week or so, when you see, when you are able to flip the number 1 overall recruit and the gravitational pull that comes with that, in terms of guys following and things, I think there is some optimism, and that is a bit salvageable for this season. So you're going to get the bowl game. You're going to get those extra bowl practices with said number 1 overall recruit. And hey, if you can go down to Columbus and at least put, stress them out a little bit, I think people would be happy with that. But they think they have a chance to win this game too, which is interesting to me. So we'll see what happens.
Anthony, that's weirdly one of the only places that Nebraska and Michigan can kind of identify as flipping a number one quarterback late in the process. Is there any part of you or the fan base that can kind of like, or this maybe happens after the season, but can kind of take a step back and look at, okay, the losses are to, at the time, number 3 Texas, definitely going to the playoff. At Illinois, a team that's been ranked all year, good ball club, probably a team that Michigan expects to beat most years, but not by a terrible loss by any means. Then at the time, number 1 Oregon, and at Indiana, 8 at the time, they're almost all certainly going to the playoff. Like, is there any part of you that's like, hey, yeah, this team wasn't what we expected them to be or what we thought they could be, but the losses really aren't egregious?
Yeah, I mean, if they it's partially the schedule, and you're not going to make excuses for it because you're a program that should hang in those games. You won a national title less than a year ago. The way that they dug themselves a hole in those Texas and Oregon games, it can't happen. On the same token, if you're a team that, if you had played Indiana's schedule, or heck, if you had even played Ohio State's schedule, you might have 1, 2, maybe 3 more wins this season to this point. It's no excuse. I mean, the Texas and Oregon games don't bother me, don't bother Michigan fans as much as, you go down by 14 at Washington, and then you come all the way back to take a lead, and then the bottom falls out in the fourth quarter. Illinois, you had that game kind of right on the doorstep for you and couldn't put together anything offensively. The Indiana game, you dig yourself a hole early and play great in the second half, but it just wasn't enough. So those are the losses to me that kind of sting more than, the other ones in terms – because, yeah, I mean – they came in this year, they lost a lot, one of the toughest schedules in college football. But on the same token, you built a reputation as a program, and, the 10 years that Jim Harbaugh was there, that you're going to win the games you're supposed to win. And I don't care what the Vegas spread says. I don't care what, FPI or any of the predictive stuff says. Michigan should win games against a Washington team that looked the way it did. It should win games against Illinois. It should be able to win a game against a good Indiana team still. So those, to me, are missed opportunities. Those types of setbacks are the reasons I am still skeptical about what this looks like under Sharon Moore. But, again, you bring in some more talent. It's the quick fix era, transfer portal, all those things. Maybe next year you can find the right chemical mixture to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Anthony, we appreciate the time, and just for the sake of chaos and humor, I kind of hope Michigan pulls it off this weekend.
Yeah, that'd be great for business for a lot of people. So,
we appreciate it, Anthony.
All right, thank you guys.
That's Anthony Broome from On 3. Yeah, I mean, like we said, the funny thing to happen is for Michigan to win.
Yeah, 100%. And will I be putting some slight dollars for them to cover the spread? Potentially,
maybe 21's a lot. That's a big number.
And you running through the schedule, I'll admit I'd forgotten who they lost to because the Washington loss was so egregious.
Yeah, but outside of that, it's really.
They played other than Texas. They were in a lot of those games.
Yeah, I mean they were in Oregon for a while. They played Indiana as well as anybody did until Ohio State beat them. I mean that's the first time Indiana even looked mortal. All year. I don't know. This is obviously a disappointing year for Michigan. It may not be as bad as 6-5 looks.
Yep.
And God, it'd be funny if they beat Ohio State.
It would be so good. Hey, so it's like what we're saying. 7-5 sounds pretty good.
Hey, we love 7-5.
Why not us?
Why not us? Quiz Bowl, baby. Here we come.
We will be back. be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I sure hope they are. I mean, honestly, Sam, we didn't even have a team. We haven't even had a team meeting since the game. Like, we walked in today and it was 8:00 Iowa special teams. There's just no time for, hey, great job, da 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 da. There's just no time for it, right? Like, so this is such a condensed week versus a really difficult opponent to prepare for that we just jumped right in. I think the thing that you saw, coming out of the game, like a lot of the guys were in the building yesterday, they know that they can do it. It's kind of like they know they're capable of it. So let's continue to do it. That's the expectation now. What was once possible is now, okay, it's not just, hey, it's possible. Now we can do it. So let's do it. And this is an excellent team we're facing, so we have to do it at a high level.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And I have to tell you that bright nights are back at Lauritsen Gardens. Get tickets now to Omaha's brightest holiday tradition and celebrate the holiday season with thousands of colorful lights, whimsical illuminated features, the Holiday Express, a 20-foot tall poinsettia tree, and plenty of vibrant foliage. With 10 family fun nights, 17 nights with Santa, and fire pits to roast marshmallows, it's festive for everyone. Open from 4:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. on select evenings through December 31st. To reserve required tickets, visit lauritsengardens.org. That is...
I like the way you say whimsical.
I'm a whimsical guy. Many people say this about me.
Danny Hurley would say that?
I think he would, if he searched his heart of hearts, he's like, that Ravi Lulla, pretty whimsical.
There's been a bug biting me since Nebraska got to bowl eligibility.
Okay.
I don't know if this is a fan base thing, if it's like just a general media, and obviously we're the media, but why has the Iowa narrative become that they're like 2012 Alabama, that they're like this impossible feat to overcome? Like it's like Nebraska got the goal to get to a bowl,
sure,
and now it's like, well, don't have to worry too much about Iowa because they're tough. And I don't know where this narrative has come from, because that's never been the expectation any of the years past when Nebraska was 5 wins coming into this game.
Yeah, or much worse than Iowa in general. This is obviously not a great Iowa team.
No. And it's nowhere close to their best teams.
Yeah, their
either.
peak. Even last year. I don't know that I've gotten that vibe as much. It may be out there for sure. I think, at least, and maybe it's me personally, once they got the Wisconsin win last week, I kind of looked at it. It was like, hey, let's go 8-5.
Yeah.
Like, let's go get Iowa. Let's go get the bowl win. Because you know how much better 8-5 feels than 6-7?
Well, and you want to know how much better an offseason feels on 3 consecutive wins?
Right, 100%.
I mean, we were so doom and gloom for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That it was all, where's Rule's hot seat, the contract talks, the Sherman articles, all that great stuff, right?
Sure.
But now you have a chance to completely turn the car the opposite direction.
Flip the narrative entirely.
And I mean, if you want to talk about an offseason of hope and hype, going into your offseason at 8-5 on a 3-game winning streak, and you start
with
the year
Wisconsin,
the next year.
Iowa bowl win.
Yes.
I like being 3-0.
And a win over what turned out to be a good Colorado team.
Yes.
You play a playoff team in Ohio State as well as anybody has all year, outside of Oregon, who actually beat them. You know, like, you look at it and you go like, oh, like maybe this is, you play an Illinois team really well that is about on par with you. You know, all of a sudden that feels way different.
Yes.
Than, let's say, you lose to Iowa, you lose the bowl game, you're 6-7 going in. Like, it's still progress. I still feel dramatically better than if they had just lost out and not made the bowl game. But it's definitely a different vibe than you get 8-5. You kind of, all of a sudden, maybe you flip a couple guys before signing day, which sounds
they already
like
have. Yep.
Yeah, they have with a couple. It sounds like they might with a couple more as well, or at least that's a possibility at the very least. But there is a real possibility that Nebraska could kind of be, I know we hate the offseason champions thing, but they could be kind of an offseason darling nationally if this goes the right way.
Well, and the best part about this coming at the end of the season was what you and DB griped on the fan base for in the first 5 games.
Yep.
Was that there was way too many nitpicking of wins. And wins were wins.
Yes.
We got to 6 wins and suddenly everything is fine and everyone's cool with how we won. Granted, the Wisconsin game was probably their best overall performance.
Yeah.
But
although defensively there was some, offensively it was definitely their best performance.
Speaking in complete hypothetical, whimsical, wicked world, if no matter how Nebraska wins, if they win against Iowa and their bowl game, 3 straight wins.
Yeah, I don't care.
I don't think anyone's going to care. I don't think anyone should. They're not going to go. If you're 7-5 going into a bowl game, I don't think anyone in the fan base is going to go, well, it didn't look the way. It won't matter. 3 wins at the end of your season is 3 wins, no matter how it came.
Give me a 3-2 Iowa South Dakota State game, or what was that, 6-5, whatever that score was. Like, I don't care what it looks like. You beat, and somebody said this yesterday. If you had told me before the year, Colorado, Wisconsin, and Iowa are all wins, and Nebraska finishes 7-5, almost the entire fan base would have taken that. No questions asked. Yes, that means you probably lost some games in there you wish you wouldn't have, and sure, Nebraska did. But you also didn't know Indiana was going to be like this.
Yes.
And you look at it and you go, Illinois is better than we thought. Indiana's better than we thought. Yeah, that kind of checks out. You know, other than that, I mean, has Nebraska lost a game that you're like, that's egregious?
I had that thought coming back last night from state football, just mentally preparing for the show, just trying to think of, what could be brought up, what might be talked about. With what we know now and how the season's progressed, the teams are we know the evaluation of the teams Nebraska's played and where they've been and all that stuff. And obviously the change in midseason to Dana Holgorsen from Satterfield. But if this season plays out 100 times, I'm not sure the results change that much.
Yeah, they may not. I mean, I think
they flip Illinois a couple of times. I think that's probably the one that you flip-flop a couple. I think the Rutgers game changes. I don't know if Nebraska loses to Rutgers necessarily. I think, just dependent.
It could look different.
Right. But I think that Illinois game kind of changed some things offensively. Dylan seemed to get a little bit off of his rhythm, getting sacked multiple times in overtime. The offense got way out of whack for those next couple of weeks.
I do think there's a world in which they come out less flat against UCLA and are able to win that one. Honestly, with USC, if we're keeping everything else the same, the OC change, Dylan gets banged up against UCLA, only gets to practice for a few days before USC. I don't know if that one flips, honestly.
Right, that's fair.
You have a short week with a new OC, new play caller. I could see UCLA flipping if Nebraska doesn't come out flat. I agree with Illinois as well. But, there was definitely a world where, if you want to play total alternate universe and Dana Holgorsen wants to come here in December when they first talked to him, there's probably a couple more wins on the schedule. Totally. That's totally fair. But he wasn't ready to come here then.
Right.
He wasn't ready to be back.
That's I love the hypothetical world that we've all lived in, that Dana Holgorsen was guaranteed to come and take over the offensive coordinator job. Not everyone, most people, I think I was singing the praises of Satterfield for handling last season and what he had and what he worked with and getting Nebraska to wherever they were offensively. I'm not sure everyone would have been completely sold on being, whoa, wholesale change on the offensive side after 1 year with Satterfield. I think more people would have questioned that moving forward. But obviously now we can look at it and just say, it probably would have been the right move. But at the time, I don't think that they were ever going to try to do that.
No, I think they wanted to bring him in. It certainly wasn't going to be in the role he's got now, not immediately, right? I did want to kind of clean up a little bit of Nebraska news that came out yesterday during Matt Rule's press conference and then also on social media, which was Malachi Coleman announcing that he's going to be entering the transfer portal. That rumor came out last week. Didn't really want to address it. There's certain things where you're like, hey, kind of just want to let the kid make his decision and then we can address it from there. It doesn't do us a ton of good to talk about ahead of time. But I know for a lot of people, that's going to be one where they're frustrated just because it's a local kid, which always really matters. He was highly touted coming out, but
intense recruiting.
Yeah.
That was Deion's first year of stealing a lot of guys over to CU, and he was a big
went
part of that.
And took a visit, and that was a potential there as well. I look at that situation, and I'm not terribly surprised. I think when people heard about the red shirt this year, that kind of solidified things. But even if you think to last year, with all the wide receiver problems and injuries Nebraska had, he was one of the last guys to get in that was healthy in terms of actually getting playing time for a team that desperately needed wide receiver help, right? So I think if you look at in context what happened last year, what happened this year, obviously something wasn't clicking. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was. Obviously Matt Rule had glowing things to say about him as a football player and a person. But we're going to see bigger picture. We're going to see a lot of this. Yes. Coach Rule said it yesterday. You're looking at 30 to 50 probably guys that are going to be leaving Nebraska this year because of the hard limit at 105. And there's going to be a lot of names that you're like, oh, it's a walk-on, whatever. Obviously it's sad to lose them, but guys that probably weren't going to have on-field impact on the program, not that they wouldn't in some other ways. But you're going to have a handful of Malachi Colemans, too. You're going to have a handful of guys that you're like, man, I was really hoping there might be more out of him.
There's going to be some names on the roster that fans know because we're Nebraska fans.
Yeah.
And we'll be disappointed in that.
For sure.
But I think it's very telling that Rule has been bringing up this conversation of the roster limits multiple times. Sometimes he's been asked, sometimes he's done it unprovoked. You're foolish to think these conversations haven't already begun.
Yeah.
He has already started this process and been like, hey, listen, there's going to be some changes, and moving forward, we wanted you to be a part of this program, but it's in our best interest for both of us to move to separate paths.
You just don't have the roster space to carry guys, right? And I do think it'll be interesting. Because I think there'll be a couple names that either surprise people or disappoint people. What I'll be interested in, and we'll probably never find out, is will those names be those guys' choices or Nebraska saying like, hey, there's probably a better fit for you out there.
Unfortunately, Rule's going to have to be that GM he never wanted to be.
Yeah.
He's going to have to go back to his Carolina days to do this.
Unfortunately, kind of the state of college football as it will begin next year, at least we think, if all this stuff actually comes to pass. Who knows? Coming up next, we're going to talk to Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
It really just comes down to football, right? If we false start, we're probably not going to win. If we turn the ball over, we're not going to win. If we can win the turnover battle, we'll have a chance to win. And so if we can tackle. So I think it all comes down to the preparation. It's not all these other things. And that's a great thing about finally getting a bowl drought over with, because it's not these things. It's just like, make this play, make this kick. You know, if John Hull doesn't do what he's done the last 2 months of getting better and better and better as a kicker, then we don't have, we have a different kicker and a different snapper than we did at the beginning of the year. And those guys have just gotten incrementally better to all of a sudden you get to a game like that. And if he's not making those field goals, the game's a lot different. So this week, to me, that's why, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. We came out and just got right back to work because I know they're going to be prepared. They're going to work, and we have to make sure we're in our fits on defense, and we have to make sure we're not continuing to give up we're giving up too many big plays passing right now, way too many. And so we just have to make sure the football's right, but I'm sure they'll prepare high this week.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Mike, what's going on, bud?
Not a ton. How are we doing today, guys?
Oh, we're doing all right. Just kind of sifting through all sorts of Nebraska stuff. Let's start here because what we were just talking about. I don't think the departure of Malachi Coleman comes as a huge shock to most people, but just how did you process that information knowing that it's actually happening?
Well, I think if you're not relatively close to covering the team or, to the situation, it probably was surprising because I think a lot of people expected Malachi was going to be a part of this thing because of kind of just how he had built his brand and people knew who he was, and he's a local kid and he had the big touchdown last year. And I think there was expectations that he was going to be a part of this whole thing with Dylan Raiola and Nebraska's passing game. And so, if you weren't relatively close in on it, I could see why it would be a pretty big surprise. I mean, obviously things came out a week ago under the surface, and Matt Rule didn't want to address it and finally did on Monday. You wish Malachi the best, and I think Nebraska will be fine moving forward. This could work out well, I think, for both sides.
Mike, when it comes to some of these decisions, obviously with the roster moves and Malachi kind of being the first domino of that effect, do you think that this is a conversation that Rule has to have with the entire roster? Do you target mostly younger players that would be in your program longer, or the older guys with less eligibility? How do you start with that, and where does those conversations then take you?
Well, I mean, every conversation different, and they're hoping to get through this week, and then, what every team is going to have is the opportunity for the following week to sort of have player interviews and determine where you're at and where this roster is at. And with that comes the NIL component, and you're going to have guys like Ja'Cory Barney, who is probably going to expect a significant commitment from Nebraska in their NIL portion. And then you're going to have guys like Carter Nelson, who's going to wonder, okay, why I didn't use my red shirt this year. I'm playing 8 snaps against Wisconsin. Like what, I don't know if it was 8. I'm just throwing that number out there. I shouldn't have said that, but someone else can fact check that for me.
Great. All right.
So it's a scenario where every player, almost regardless of situation, is going to have to determine what they're going to do. And it's going to be like this every year. And you're going to have guys that have been hearing from different programs through back channels for roughly the entire year, and they're going to have to make decisions. It's going to be fascinating. On top of it, we expect Nebraska to make some personnel changes on their coaching staff. And so what does that mean for certain players who are recruited by certain coaches? And so there's a lot that goes into it. I would expect a lot of player movement on both sides of it. I would expect a lot of player movement throughout the country. I don't think Nebraska is going to be alone in having a lot of conversations and trying to size up where things are on, on December 1st or whatever day you want to use there. December 9th is a critical one. That's when the portal actually opens. That's when Nebraska can go shopping in it, if you will. But they're going to have a lot of conversations leading up to that point. And 1890 and every other NIL operation is going to have to be pretty involved. They're going to have to be creative because you can't pay everyone. So how can you keep some people happy?
I'm glad you kind of brought up the opposite side of that, because I feel like with the way that Rule has talked about this roster movement, it's felt as if and it will be that Nebraska will have many moves to make out of their current roster. But how many conversations do you think will happen to get new players in? Because that's the balance, right? You have to be able to bring in new talent in positions and places that you need mixed with your recruiting class. And then exporting some of the talent that needs to leave to get to that roster limit. I mean, it just feels like this is going to be more of a conversation of getting rid of some players, but there obviously has to be some thought into including new talent too, right?
Yeah, without coming across too callous, because there is a value to it. I mean, Nebraska is one of the few teams in the country that has as many players on a roster as it does.
Right.
So some of the conversations that we're talking about are guys that were never going to see the football field. So we don't have to overthink it in that regard. To me, the more interesting conversations are if you're a guy and you don't think the opportunity is going to happen for you at Nebraska, and you're just in your first year or your second year, are you ready to just go put your toe in the water of what's going to be the biggest portal class that's ever existed? So the fascinating stuff to me isn't so much getting to the 105. It's the guys that are in the sort of meatier part of the curve that kind of falls between roster spot like 92 and roster spot 75. Like I'm just, picking a number here, but there's probably somewhere between 15 to 20 guys that are scholarship level players that are going to have to make determinations. If Nebraska, where I want to be to develop, is there opportunity here? Is there a pathway to playing time? And then for Nebraska, that conversation is, do we want to invest the resources to develop this individual? Can they help us? Are they close enough to being a player? Have we already recruited past them? I mean, those are sort of the guys in limbo, and the middle part of that are sort of the fascinating conversations, because you could have a player, and I'm just going to use Quentin Ives as an example. But what is Quentin Ives going into his third year at Nebraska's program? Is he ready to be right there with Emmett Johnson? Has he been passed up by Mekhi Nelson? Nebraska has Jamarian Parker and Connor Booth coming in. Gabe Irvin's somewhere in the program, though I don't think he will be by the end of the season, or by bowl time, because I don't know that the opportunity is going to be there. Like, there's just all these little individual conversations that you can have position by position, let alone the 20 or so walk-ons that probably are going to have to go find, a D2 or an FCS program to try to go play for at this point in time, because Nebraska just can't carry 130 players anymore.
Yeah, Schaefer, the low-key kind of consequence of this is those FCS programs are going to absolutely eat this offseason, which, frankly, I'm here for. But you did mention kind of in passing there some maybe potential changes on the coaching staff. You trying to break some news here, or are you just kind of speculating? I
don't think it's breaking news to expect changes on Matt Rule's staff in the offseason. I can't tell you who those changes are going to be and when exactly it's going to happen and which coaches are going out and which coaches are coming in. But yeah, I don't expect that we're going to have the same exact coaching staff next year. And it could be everything from Tony White takes another job to Nebraska decides to move in a different direction at positions where they have struggled this year. So there's lots of different ways the movement could happen, but I don't expect the same staff to be back. And especially because if we're talking about, a new offensive coordinator in Dana Holgorsen, and it sure feels like we're going down that, path as we kind of expected when this all got announced a few weeks ago, then does he have an idea of what he wants for specific assistant coaches? Does Glenn Thomas fit what he wants as a quarterback coach? Is Garrett McGuire what he wants as a wide receivers coach? Is EJ Barthel what he wants as a running backs coach? I don't think this is breaking news. I don't think Donovan Raiola is going to go anywhere. So we'll leave that one alone for the time being. Yeah. If you're going to go somewhere, it's Luke Pickles' personal security is going to escort him.
The Wisconsin State Police, yes.
Schaefer, let's since this has been speculated since last offseason, right, with Tony White. So we're not doing anything crazy here, and we're not reporting anything.
He turned down jobs.
He turned down jobs, right? So this is not – we're just talking here. But let's say Tony White does move on for whatever job or reason or whatever. Do you expect, as I think a lot of people do, that John Butler would just be slid into a defensive coordinator role? Or do you think – obviously Phil Snow's gotten a lot of run in the last few weeks as well, that he maybe come in as a stopgap. Like, do you have any sense on how you think that might get handled?
Yeah, I know just from his history, Matt Rule likes to work with guys if they're going to be coordinators for him. That's part of why I think he wanted Dana Holgorsen as an analyst so he could sort of pick his brain a little bit and see what that was like. before he ever became an offensive coordinator. And that's why they think he was involved last year. I think that was a potential setup that if we have to make a change, I want this guy involved with us early. And it didn't work out that way, but then they were able, he was bored, is the famous quote here. So they were able to get Dana Holgorsen either way. I would imagine John Butler is sort of the first person that gets a long look here. He clearly wants to be a defensive coordinator. He left the Bills organization for the opportunity to be a defensive coordinator because he wasn't going to get it there. He didn't have another job. And when Nebraska came calling in the summer, when they moved on from Evan Cooper, it has always kind of felt like that was your back pocket. This is the defensive coordinator if Tony White were to move on. But, maybe they want to go in a different direction. It's not like the secondary has played particularly well. Maybe they want to look at an entirely different defensive scheme. Maybe Tony White goes nowhere and is back for his third year at Nebraska. I mean, there's lots of different ways things can play out. I would say that it felt more strongly at this time last year that Tony White was going to be out the door than maybe it does right now. Mm-hmm. But that's also the coaching cycle. We don't know what's going to be available, and we don't know what he's interested in. I think he's head coach material. I think Tony White's going to be a really good coach, whether he's in Lincoln or whether he's somewhere else. And I hope he gets that opportunity. Be fascinated to see if that comes about here this offseason or not.
Jafe, when it comes to White's ability to become a head coach, and I know you said you don't know really what his valuation is for where he wants to go or what program he might be looking for, but is there maybe a contingency of maybe some programs that have an opening or a potential opening coming up that are going to be watching Nebraska's last two games to see if he is the candidate that they want? Do you think that there's pressure on him to be able to get the defense looking a certain way before he tries to put his name back in the circle?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who sort of poo-pooed the idea that he was a candidate last year because Nebraska's defense has had struggles at times this year. You're not hiring a guy based off of a sample size of like 4 games. You're hiring someone because of their career, their preparation, what they've done to put them in that situation. Everything of Tony White's career, nothing's going to come down to how they look against Iowa on Friday. I mean, nothing's going to come down to how they looked against Wisconsin. It's going to be, do you think this guy could be front and center as your head coach, or do you think this guy can give your defense a lift if you're looking as an offensive coordinator? And I think the answer to that for a lot of people would be yes. It's just a matter of, is this what you're going to choose over someone else? And so you're stacking them up against a bunch of unknown comparisons. And I'm not sure what type of job he wants. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that UCLA was there for his, he could have had that job instead of Deshaun Foster. And I don't think it was the right time or the right time for both UCLA or for Tony White to go back to his alma mater. And so that's why he said no. He could have went to USC and been their defensive coordinator before they hired UCLA's. And he said no. I mean, he was a candidate and a finalist for the San Diego State job. I don't know if he took his name out of the running there, but I think that could have been a really strong fit for him. And now they're going to be in the revised Pac-12. I think out west makes the most sense because that's where his recruiting base has largely been. But this is a guy who's also born in Texas, has recruited in New York and Florida and Texas and all over the place. I think anywhere that is looking for someone that, wants to be a program builder, they're going to be interested in Tony White. But I don't think anything that happens on Friday would move the needle further one way or another. I guess if Nebraska were to lose 72-7 or something, there's the fabled stories of where Bo Pelini was going to go before that 2012 Big Ten championship game. You had Tennessee, Auburn, Miami. They were all basically sniffing around, and then none of them wanted Bo Pelini after that.
We're talking with Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7. Schaefer, I do want to talk about actual football games and not just hypotheticals here for a second.
Oh, this is fun.
If that's okay with you. I don't really.
I go where you go.
That's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah. Do you want to talk Danny Hurley? You got any thoughts on old Dan?
We sure can. Do you think he's got a game plan that can match up against Nebraska's front court right now?
No, because I'm sure the referees will ruin it for him like they did yesterday. But
I'd love a Danny Hurley tech at PBA.
Oh my gosh,
that'd be fun.
I love all Danny Hurley techs because he's the worst. But I wanted to talk about the Wisconsin game for a second because I look at this Wisconsin team and I go, okay, this is a Wisconsin defense that only gave up 16 points to Oregon. It's also Wisconsin defense that gave up 42 points to Iowa. I don't know what to do with the result that we saw on Saturday. Does it even matter what Wisconsin is for what we saw on Saturday offensively?
I don't think so. I mean, I didn't think Wisconsin was good coming into the year. I didn't think Wisconsin was good when they beat up 3 below average Big Ten teams in the middle of their schedule and got back to 5-2 and had people talking about them. I didn't think Wisconsin was good coming off of the loss to Oregon. I think they're a capable team, but they have a lot of flaws. I felt good about Nebraska's ability to expose those before the year. And then obviously, the confidence is shaken a little bit with how Nebraska was playing. But how that game played out on Saturday, I think was more to me about what Nebraska did to find themselves and then was able to do to another team than it was wherever Wisconsin's at as a program. I think it's far more to me about what Nebraska was able to do and prove. They kind of turned back the clock and they found what felt like the Illinois game version of themselves, where you have Dylan Raiola confident throwing the ball. You have Nebraska is able to play pretty effectively running the ball too. And then everything kind of came together for him, unlike how it did in that Illinois game. I walked away from that feeling like this is a version of Nebraska that's been there all along and it disappeared for a month stretch. To me, part of this season, regardless of the fact that they made a bowl game or not, and they can go to Iowa and win that game. I picked them to do it before the year. I'll probably pick them to do it, again, because I think they're a more talented team than Iowa. I think they're a better football team than certainly a 6-5 record would indicate. And that's partially why this is going to feel like it's an underachieving season to me, even though they were able to get to a bowl game. They finish just out how they're capable. If you win against Iowa and you have a bowl opportunity, and we'll see where that's at, and you go win that game and you're 8-5, all right, probably not an underachieving season. You lose on Friday night and you're 6-6, and it's going to be great if you go to the Duke Mayo Bowl or the Music City Bowl or the Pinstripe Bowl, because Nebraska hasn't been there in practices and all this stuff. It's still an underachieving season. They're better than a 6-6 team. I truly believe that. They're a better team than the one that lost to UCLA and USC. They're a better team than the one that got waxed by Indiana. They're a better team than the one that should have beat Illinois at home. They have a lot of losses that you look back on and they really shouldn't have them, but they do, and that's who they are.
Schaefer, Rule on Monday had said that they haven't had time to really celebrate the fact that they've got the monkey off their back, that they're bowl eligible, and they've been in preparation for Iowa. But is it a good thing that it's a short week and that it's the rivalry game against Iowa, that the team can kind of get up for this moment and not have a lapse after such a strong performance and overcoming the demons and breaking the curse and all that stuff that came with the Wisconsin win?
Yeah, I have two minds of this. They shouldn't be celebrating the fact that they've got lots of teams have 6 wins. This, part of it to me is okay, it's good for the program because it's moving forward, but we don't have to make so much of it that it's just, incredible. It's not Nebraska basketball making the NCAA tournament. It's not to that level of, oh, wow, look at what they were able to accomplish. They never do this. 70-some teams have qualified already with 6 wins with another week to go. This happens in college football. So I don't think they needed to make too much of it. And I think we'll see growth from this team if they're able to win a game like they did on Saturday and then show up and play hard and be prepared and do their job against Iowa. Maybe they don't win, but if they come out and they play hard and they look prepared and they're not making dumb mistakes and they don't look like a team who just, took a giant step back after taking a step forward, I think that's success as a program too. So I would like to see growth from them where, you utilize the fact that, like you said, short week, so you got to have your head into it. It's a rivalry game, so you obviously want some payback there. A lot of guys on that team have lost a lot of close games to Iowa in their career. There shouldn't really need to be more motivation than what they already have. And like I said, I want to see growth from them as a team. You took a nice step forward. Don't give it back in the first game.
What does progress look like for you offensively against Iowa? I mean, do they have to drop 40 again on them, or what does that look like to you?
No, but I certainly would enjoy seeing it.
Yeah, I think everybody would take that, right?
Sorry, I didn't know if that was part of the question.
Yeah, what do you think the poll would be of Husker fans saying, would you rather score 40 points against Iowa or not?
Yeah. So I think, to me, like, I want to see what this running game looks like against Iowa. They did a really nice job of the Dana Holgorsen thing where you just line a bunch of receivers somewhere else and then run where those receivers aren't. And like that's Dana Holgorsen calling run plays. Like, our West Virginia guy was all over that. He's like, he's just gonna take advantage of everyone thinking that he's a pass happy guy, set a bunch of receivers out there, take all the attention over there, and then run the other way. And some of their best runs were off of that. Can you do that against Iowa? Can that offensive line, which kind of kicked ass, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but they did.
You can say ass on the air.
All right, there we go. So they kicked ass against Wisconsin. And I would like to see them follow that up.
Yes, the running
lanes.
We got to make sure our conversation is staying on track, because we had an important question that got filled with something else at the end of that. I got sidetracked.
I saw what happened there, and I was just going to move as quickly as I could going forward.
I didn't even do
that. I think the running lanes were great. The pass protection was fantastic. They didn't allow a sack. They didn't give up a tackle for a loss. I think Nebraska only had a handful of plays that would have been under 3 yards in that game. And some of them were because you had to run 2 yards to get a touchdown. So, like, some of them is just there's no more yards to gain. So it's it was a really strong offensive performance. But yeah, I want to see, does that line hold up? Can they run the ball on a team with a little bit better of a run defense? The remarkable thing is, it's not like Wisconsin had a bad statistical defense coming into that game. Yeah. I just didn't believe they were very good, and I think Nebraska proved that.
Just quick one here, Schaefer. How big is this contest for a guy like Ty Robinson? It feels like Iowa's been talked about being so physical. It's one of their better offensive lines that they've had in some time. If Ty goes out and plays well, this has to project well for him at the next level.
Yeah, I think there's no question he's going to be playing for an NFL team. I mean, the bigger part is he able to do it where he's a non-roster invite of sorts to a training camp, or is he going to be a draft pick? And so teams are going to look at what happens on Friday against an Iowa team that's built like an NFL program. So you want to see how guys do against that. And so it's a big opportunity. Like I said, he's played in a bunch of these games where he's watched Nebraska lose when they led in 2021. They had the punt blocked. He watched Nebraska lose in 22, where, again, you have the opportunity to win that game. Or no, they won in 22. In 23, you have the opportunity to win that game after the Tommy Hill pick, and you're not able to finish it off. I mean, so he's been on that side of the ledger enough times. It's a big, big game. I have to imagine it's a motivating game. And I assume he wants to go out with a bunch of wins, win this one. And the nice thing about Nebraska, I don't think they're going to have a lot of bowl opt-outs relative to who they might play. So I think they're going to get a lot of guys who are going to be juiced up to play in that game. And if they beat Iowa, they could play on, New Year's Eve day in Tampa. Like, Nebraska would probably move up to that spot. And that's kind of interesting too.
That's Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7. Schaefer, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Schaefer.
Have
a great Thanksgiving.
Schaefer. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio and 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. And I got to tell you about my friends over at Game Day Men's Health. Low testosterone doesn't just affect you. It can impact your relationships too. Game Day Men's Health offers testosterone replacement therapy that helps you feel more like yourself, which can lead to stronger, healthier relationships. Their in-clinic approach means you get comprehensive care that addresses both your physical and emotional health, helping you reconnect with your loved ones. Why settle for impersonal telehealth when you can have real in-person support with a super cool crew over at Game Day, by the way? Make sure you get to GameDayMen'sHealth.com for more info or to schedule an appointment. That is Game Day Men's Health. It's now time for one of my favorite segments of the day, Bet on It, brought to you by our friends over at Warhorse Sportsbook. No bets, no glory. I want to bet on things that have already happened. That seems easy, right?
And I'll bet you that you lose that bet.
Not as easy as it sounds, because
claim that?
He's pretty good on the drops. He's pretty quick on them sometimes.
Watching Shane in action, like being here, because pulled behind the curtain, I'm usually back at HQ, putting up the podcast stuff, and this is incredible.
Yeah,
it's like watching a who's a famous painter?
Oh, come on, Shane.
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh. It's like watching Van Gogh cut his ear off. It's crazy.
I was gonna say, I mean, he doesn't have all his parts. So.
Well, he's been gone for a while. He probably doesn't have any of them anymore, Shane. So here's what I want to do with the NFL, because we haven't gotten to a ton of NFL this week for obvious reasons. Lots going on. But I want to know who we think is actually good, because I look at a bunch of teams around the league, and I look at these results on a week-to-week basis, and I watch as many games as I possibly can. And there's some teams where I just don't know. And I think number one out of that group for me is the Minnesota Vikings.
I was just going to say, I was about to shock you and just say I think the Vikings are good. The problem is that you're always you talk about the Vikings Monday through Saturday, and you're like, their defense is good, that they always step up when they need to. The Bears game was a bit of an anomaly. I feel like that they were, just kind of thrown into the fire with the new Bears coordinator and stuff. But statistically speaking, over the course of the season, they have been just dominant over some of these other teams.
Yeah.
But you just wait. Sunday morning, you wake up and you're like, is this the Sam Darnold turn back to the Wicked Witch of the West game? Like, you just wait for him to just melt into a puddle. That's their biggest crutch, is like the bad Sam Darnold game coming at the wrong time.
And there's been some ugly performances, to be fair. Now, they've won several of them, right? I mean, 12-7 against the Jaguars comes up. The 30-20 loss at the Rams. It's not like the Colts 21-13 was a real great-looking performance. The Titans are terrible. That was only 23-13. So you're looking at this schedule, and you're like, okay, they're 9-2. Obviously, they're behind only probably the best team in the NFL in Detroit in their division. And you mentioned that defense, incredible, dominant. You love them. Sam Darnold's been good enough, sometimes better than that. But is he still Sam Darnold?
But if you're going to pick a second NFC North team, because obviously you're picking the Lions.
100%.
You're probably leaning towards the Packers.
Yes.
Even with the extra loss, you're going to lean because Jordan Love has been erratic, but I trust Jordan Love more than what I've seen in whole from Sam Darnold.
I actually think I go Vikings there.
Really?
I don't think Jordan Love's that good. That's I've said this. I said this when they paid him. I was like, I don't think you have to pay him yet. He had another year before you had to pay him. Listen, just give me a little more sample size. I would love to see a little more for Jordan Love before I start paying him $50 million.
How much more do you need?
More than half a season.
Oh, you meant when they paid him? Okay. I thought you meant like now.
I still am like, there's a lot of weeks where I'm like, he's okay.
It's fair. He loves throwing a deep interception.
He loves
a deep pick.
It's our Tommy Armstrong YOLO ball. Like, he loves that thing,
Christian Watson's somewhere down there, right?
He loves a good arm punt, which is great. But I don't know. Every time I watch Jordan Love and I'm watching him, I'm like, that dude doesn't scare me.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to pay somebody $50 million a year, I want him to scare people.
Do you know, just on the conversation of which teams are good and which aren't?
Yeah.
This one pains me.
Okay.
The Denver Broncos might be good.
Would you bet on the Denver Broncos being good?
To make the playoffs?
No, just being good. Like, just being a good football team. You're watching them. You go, is that a good football team? Do you bet on that?
Were you in the trust tree? No one's going to know.
Yeah, just trust tree.
Just you and me?
Circle of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knicks is playing winning football. They've got something figured out.
They have played a lot better.
Yeah.
They also did just beat the 2-9 Raiders.
Good point. Fair.
Who are T-Rash. They're terrible.
So the close loss to the Chiefs, obviously blocked field goal.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever.
Blew out the Falcons. Got blown out by the Ravens. That's an anomaly. I just wiped that one off. Blew out the Saints. Beat the Panthers.
The Saints are terrible, by the way. The Panthers are terrible.
Did you say the Raiders were T-Rex? I didn't see that they had short arms.
It's not what anybody said, Shane. Appreciate you being real dialed in there.
How about a real fun Jameis
Raiders
Winston?
aren't that bad.
The Raiders are very bad.
I mean, they're bottom tier, but they're not lowest tier.
They're lowest tier.
They're pretty bad.
Jets are lowest tier.
What tier could they possibly be in if they're not last? They have one of the worst records.
They're not last, though.
They're awful to watch.
They're top tier of the low tier.
No.
The top tier of the low. So that means they're in the last tier.
They're top tier of the low. They're top tier of the 2-9
tier. Shane, I need you to put yourself in timeout. That's a terrible take. The Raiders are one of the worst teams in the NFL. That's 2 of your Broncos' 7 wins, by the way, are over terrible Raiders teams.
Would you rather be the Raiders or the Jaguars? Because your man Trevor Lawrence got a stadium named after him.
I wouldn't have paid Trevor Lawrence either, to be fair.
Wow.
I mean, listen, the production matters. Like,
yes,
the talent's there, the production matters, and the production's not there.
I feel like the Jaguars are closer to completely
just being able to tear it down.
Yes.
See, that's the thing is I not that I love the ownership or front office in Jacksonville, but the Raiders have decades of ineptitude working against them, right? Like the Jacksonville has figured it out more frequently in recent years, which is shocking to say, than the Raiders have.
And their owner's not broke.
He is certainly not broke. Yeah, that dude is flush with cash, as some do say there. But you're looking at, so 2 of your wins are the Raiders. Another one's the Jets.
Back to the Broncos, right?
Yeah, another one's the Panthers. Another one's the Saints. You
can only beat who's on your schedule. I'm sorry. What do you want me to say?
You know who's on your schedule that was not trash? The Seahawks, the Steelers, the Chargers, the Ravens, the Chiefs.
All right. You convinced me. The Broncos are bad. I'm glad you convinced me. Sorry.
They've had a lot of teams on their schedule.
I'm a knee-jerk NFL fan at best. I apologize. I apologize for any people who know me as the Bronco hater that I am, that I ever gave them credence. In fact, maybe this was just a loose way in my mind to make sure that they actually are bad. So I appreciate what you did for me there.
You needed somebody to talk you into the fact that they were actually trash. Yeah, they haven't beat a good team all year.
No.
I mean, that's basically because the Buccaneers, which is probably their best win, also not that good. I mean, maybe the Falcons, but maybe the NFC South just sucks. Like I don't, because the Falcons and Buccaneers get beat up on the Saints and the Panthers all year.
Yeah.
So I don't think they have a good win on their schedule. They're better than I thought they'd be. I'll give you that. Not betting on them being a good football team.
Who has a better chance to get to the Super Bowl? Ravens or Eagles?
Eagles.
Just without the Chiefs in their way, or what? Like, what makes you say that?
I just think Eagles are better. The way they're playing,
but they feel like the same pumpkin mentality. Like I'm waiting for them to fall off the cliff. Like it feels like those first 4 weeks of the year when they were 2-2, they had that bad loss at Tampa Bay.
Yeah, like some friction between Sirianni. So here's why I think it's the Eagles. One, I think Saquon Barkley is just in another stratosphere right now.
Absolutely,
and that fixes a lot of problems. Second, take out the end of last season and the beginning of this season. Who this team has been for the last 3 years is really freaking good.
Yeah.
And so if you look at that as like, hey, weird outlier, as opposed to that's who they are, because the larger sample size would tell you they're probably closer to being a good football team than being the team that they looked like end of last year, beginning of this year. I will say there is this cloud hanging over of if Sirianni and Hurts' relationship goes south, the whole thing blows up.
Right. And that's the thing that I fear the most is that the Eagles have the highest chance to be riding high and then take an absolute nosedive with one bad game. That's I think the thing that keeps me from saying that I would pick them as an NFC favorite.
Here's my two problems on well, you didn't say NFC favorite. You said
Super Bowl,
Ravens or Eagles.
Yes.
So if I have to pick between one of those two, because am I taking the Eagles over the Lions? Probably not. No. But if I'm saying, hey, are the Eagles more likely to make a Super Bowl or the Ravens? I'm going Eagles for a couple reasons. Okay. One, as you mentioned, no Chiefs in my way.
Yes.
I don't have to face Patrick Mahomes until I get to the place we're already trying to go.
Right.
Love that for me if I'm the Eagles. Second, the Ravens defense scares me, and not in the way that I think they're scary.
Right.
It scares me if I'm betting on them.
Yeah, it's like a nightlight type of scares. Like you have it up in your room.
It's like a jump scare. You're like, I would rather bet on the Eagles not imploding because they've somehow managed to get through that when it seemed like Sirianni was going to be the first coach fired this year. I would rather bet on them not imploding than I would on both the Ravens defense holding up and them finding a way to beat Mahomes. Got to go Eagles there.
Man, you're good.
For me?
Yeah.
For me. That's Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook, the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. Get to warhorsecasino.com for all their promotions and a full list of house rules. Coming up next, Stephen Means, who covers Ohio State for Cleveland.com.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Head high snap. Evans rolls to his right, puts the punt in the air. Caleb Downs for Ohio State drifting to his right. He's going to watch that bounce at the 30, roll to the 20, where Downs grabs a hold of it, spins by a defender at the 25, moves to the 30, 35, right side 40, 50-yard line. Caleb Downs behind blockers to the Indiana 40, middle of field to the 30, to the 20 goes Caleb Downs, to the 10, and into the end zone. Punt return touchdown for Caleb Downs.
We are back here wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now on the phone by Stephen Means. He covers Ohio State for Cleveland.com. Stephen, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate you joining us. I know it is a busy week around the Ohio State parts. We talked to one of your Michigan counterparts earlier this morning as well. I got to ask, this is a very strange spot for the Ohio State-Michigan game, considering what the stakes have been on both sides before and where Michigan is right now as a program. How has that changed at all, the way Ohio State is looking at the game?
No, not in the slightest. Because you got to think, this is – every game matters, right? Every version of the Ohio State-Michigan game matters. But I don't know if one has ever mattered more to a group of people than this one matters when you put it in the context of there is not a single human being in Ohio State's football roster who has ever beat Michigan. Literally. Even Caleb Downs, who was a transfer, his season was ended by Michigan last year, so he at least has some in common with them. When's the last time you could say an Ohio State football team did not have a single person on it who knows what it's like to beat Michigan? So there is an era of Ohio State football players who are trying to prevent something that hasn't happened since the early 90s. And Ryan Day's been great. He's one of the best coaches in college football. But I don't know if I can say with 100% certainty that he survives a fourth straight loss to Michigan, especially this Michigan team who just got bowl eligible 4 days ago, right? So the narrative, the concept of why this roster came together, why so many of these guys put off the NFL, decided to come back, everything rides on whether or not they win or lose this game. And so, yes, national championship hopes are still out there. So if they lose this game, they're not going to the Big Ten championship game. Indiana would then clinch, even though they beat Indiana last week. But they can still go through the bigger things. But nothing is bigger than this game simply because of all the context of what the last 3 years have been.
Steven, I'm glad you mentioned kind of Ryan Day's job status here, because obviously the dude has won a ton of football games, but has lost the last 3 years, the one that matters the most in Columbus. If for whatever reason Ryan Day were to lose to Michigan this year, would he have to win a national championship to save his job?
Probably, which then opens up the conversation for, the culture of college football, especially with this fan base. And I think it's been something we've been hinting at with the fan base for a couple of years of what happens in a season where you lose to Michigan but win an national title. And we came within a 40-yard field goal of maybe finding out back in 2022 what that would feel like. But you just don't want to put Ross Bjork, who is 6 months into the job, in a position to have to decide what type of standard he wants to set here, right? And
sure,
we're moving into this new landscape of what college football is, and rivalries still matter, and this one probably matters more than any other. But Ross Bjork, if Ryan Day loses this game and they don't win a national title, Ross Bjork's going to have to decide how much the Michigan game matters in comparison to everything else. But that does get difficult if they do win a national title. It's almost similar to Cardell Jones winning a national title, but your starting quarterback coming back when you start.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's that conversation, except with millions and millions of more dollars we're talking about, because we're talking about a $10 million head coach. So I think it's the only way that it's 100%. I think him winning a national title makes it 99.9% safe. Anything less than that, whether he does or not, it's the conversation for the next one.
Looking at this contest, like with Michigan, there's obviously the big spread. Ohio State is favored by 21, and it's a game at the Horseshoe. Do you think that there's almost a thought that this contest is getting to be where, I don't know, that Michigan is going to have to play up to the standard of Ohio State, and that the fear is Ohio State plays down to the standard of Michigan just for this season? Or is it more on the motivating factor that Ohio State, like you said, just wants to get through this game and get to the Big Ten title?
It's definitely not the latter, right? This is not the game where you just get through it to get to your next step, right? You can't – the Ohio State-Michigan game is weird, man. I mean, we've all seen the 90s era with a bunch of Hall of Fame – literal NFL Hall of Famers on that team, and they kept losing them. A lot of people have been trying to call Ryan Day John Cooper and don't realize – the reason the John Cooper era was so frustrating wasn't because you were losing to Michigan. It's because you were losing the bad Michigan teams who were then costing you potential national championship opportunities. That's not what the last years have been. Yes, we know Connor Stallions is a human being, and we know that's a thing out there. But even outside of that, these three Michigan teams are already pretty good, and the last one won a national title. This year would be a John Cooper loss if he lost this team. Ohio State is 10-1 with a chance to go win the Big Ten championship and a national championship. And you're telling me you lost to a 6-5 Michigan team? That's why you didn't get back to Indianapolis? That would be the John Cooper era. There is no overlooking, but at the same time, this game is weird. Things can happen. It just feels like logic and normal football can sometimes go out the window in favor of emotion, right? So it's just, I mean, we've seen a dude get kicked out of the game and then flip off the stand, right? We've seen Aiden Hutchinson sack C.J. Stroud, and then snow starts magically falling from the sky, right? This game is not logical. So while I don't think from a football standpoint Michigan has any chance against Ohio State, that's just not a chance Ohio State should put itself in a position to find out whether that's true or not.
I don't know. As a fan of chaos, you have me convinced. I think I want everything possible to happen in this game. I want it to be like a 2-point game, and it's tied off of like a safety.
And now I want a blizzard, too.
Yeah, I mean, you've dreamt up a nightmare scenario for Ohio State, but it sounds perfect to me for my Saturday morning. So, I mean, if it doesn't end up that way, I will be very disappointed.
We're talking with Stephen Means from Cleveland.com. Stephen, I kind of want to talk big picture here on Ohio State season. A lot of the narratives coming into the year, was the amount of money spent on the roster. I believe Urban Meyer said this is one of the best rosters he's ever seen. Do you think Ohio State has lived up to that standard? I know they took the loss to a very good Oregon team. 1-point loss. It's right there. You have the controversial call as well. Like I don't think anybody looks at that and is like, oh, it's a terrible loss by any means. But do you think this Ohio State team has lived up to what a lot of people thought they could be?
I would say yes and no. I would say Caleb Downs is as good as they say he is.
Absolutely.
I would say Will Howard is maybe better than we anticipated him being. And we thought he was going to be, hey, make smart decisions and don't get in the way. And instead does that while also maybe being a little bit more. I think he's drastically helped his draft stock this year. And it's kind of weird that a guy whose numbers are on par with every quarterback in the country, and in fact, it's better than a lot of quarterbacks in the country, and he's just not in the Heisman Trophy discussion, even though, listen, it's either going to be Travis Hunter or Ashton Genty who wins it. So this is not a, hey, Will Howard should win the Heisman, but it is a, hey, Will Howard should have a seat in New York conversation. I think Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins just being here has brought the best out of him because these are two of the best running backs in the country. The 18-year-old alien, J.J. Smith, I don't know. I don't even know. There's not enough words to talk about how good he is, and also Mecca Book and Cornell Tate are very good as well. I think the defense, it had a weird patch there against Oregon where Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyler Williams, Ty Hamilton, they maybe weren't getting after the quarterback the way we thought they would, but it's also unlocked the version of Jim Knowles that I think Oklahoma State fans got to see, the creativeness, the aggressiveness, and so now that defense is living up to par. So I think the way it looks hasn't always been maybe what we thought, but the fact that they're in a conversation where it feels like you brought up the Oregon game, I don't think anybody left that Oregon game thinking that Ohio State can't win a national title. I think we all left that game thinking Ohio State and Oregon might just be on a tier by themselves, and the last 6 weeks have really kind of validated that.
Stephen, you bring up Will Howard there, and I feel like since the Oregon game, obviously the slide at the end of the contest to have the game run out of time, the national conversation around Will Howard then pivoted back to, well, he never really won that big of a game at Kansas State. Is he still the quarterback Ohio State needs right now? Has that conversation died down now that Ohio State has quietly continued to win and be impressive?
Yeah, because he's gotten better, right? I mean, listen, he played really well against Oregon. He just didn't get it down a second quicker. And Jeremiah Smith had an offensive pass interference, and he lost his starting left tackle, right? And Quinshon Judkins fumbled the ball. But he played really well. Then the Penn State game happened where it was like, I don't know, man, you're getting a little shaky in that situation. I think last week against Indiana, really the last couple of weeks, but more last week because that's when everybody's watching, Will Howard has shown that we've seen that times when these are really elite teams maybe win national championships in spite of their quarterback. I think he'll be on the list of reasons for why Ohio State wins a national title this year if they do, and that's a revelation that I'm not sure any of us thought we should get to. And that's why I said earlier, I don't get why he's not in the Heisman Trophy candidacy conversation, because there's no way people watched what he did against Indiana and thought that guy doesn't deserve an opportunity. And maybe, you know what, people are going to be watching this weekend. If he has a Dwayne Haskins or Justin Fields or JT Barrett moment in the Michigan game, that might help. And then also if he avenges the loss against Oregon, I think that helps. I think it's just reached a situation here where as long as Ohio State doesn't drop the ball this week, I think Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard should be playing for a spot.
Stephen Means from Cleveland.com. Stephen, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Anytime, guys.
That's Hurrdat Sports Radio. We'll be back tomorrow.
See you. Have a good day. Love you.